false alarm.
Exactly.
Good evening, everyone. Zoning Board of July 26, 2022 of the Township of Monroe is now in session. Call to order. Please stand to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. In accordance with the announcement of the Sunshine Law, in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, it is hereby announced and shall be entered into the minutes of this meeting that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the following: posted on the bulletin board of the township of the office of the township clerk, posted on the bulletin boards within the municipal complex, printed in the Home News Tribune on December 30th, 2021, posted on the Monroe Township website, and sent to those individuals who have requested personal notice. Roll call, please, Madam Secretary.
Ms. Damiani?
Here.
Mr. Lupo?
Here.
Mr. Masters? Mr. Busman?
Here.
Ms. Caratori?
Here.
Mr. Tanzi?
Here.
Mr. Jaffe?
Here.
Mr. Verdi? Mr. Cole?
Here.
Chairman LaFata?
Here.
Jaffe for Masters.
Okay, board members, in the absence of Mr. Masters, Mr. Jaffe, you'll be a full voting member this evening. Thank you. Okay, board members, we have the minutes from our June 28th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain. I was absent from the meeting.
Carol abstained, everyone else was a pass. And so was Mr. Busman. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, our first application is BA-5184-19, Rasua Construction Incorporated. Please come forward.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, professional staff, members of the public. My name is Peter Klauser. I'm an attorney with the firm Heilbron Pape. I have the pleasure of representing Brazusa Construction with regard to their application before this board this evening. This is an application for final site plan approval for Phase 2 of the application that was previously approved by the board, as well as an amendment to the use variance and the final site plan that was granted for Phase 1 of the application. The property is located on Union Hill Road, borders Manalapan. The property is, the board previously granted use variance and preliminary site plan approval for the continued use of the property as the applicant's hardscaping business, as well as 2 mini warehouse buildings. Thereafter, we came back and got final site plan approval for Phase 1, which is the landscaping portion of the property and essentially 100% of the site improvements. And then Phase 2 was left to be the 2 mini warehouse buildings. So the 2 mini warehouse buildings received their preliminary approval. We're here tonight for final approval to move forward with them. And we're asking for an amendment to the use variance that was previously granted because the hardscaping business was not permitted in the zone. Because during construction, there's an opportunity to add some square footage for the applicant's offices, approximately 700 square feet, a little more than that. Mr. Ali is going to take you through that. But technically, that triggers an amendment to the use variance because the board only granted a certain amount of office space. But the office space to be utilized is only by the applicant. It's not for any additional users or uses. But it does trigger a use variance and an amendment to the prior approval. So that's why we're asking for that amendment. And again, Mr. Ali will take you through how that came about and describe it for you. So I have 2 witnesses this evening, Sharif Ali and Frank Antisel. Sharif's our professional engineer. I know the board's very familiar with him. And Mr. Antisel is the professional planner to discuss the amendment to the prior use variance. So, Mr. Lafata, with your permission, I would ask that Sharif be sworn and if the board would accept him as a professional engineer.
Do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address for the record, please.
Sharif Ali, A-L-Y,
And your address?
757 Ridgewood Avenue, North Brunswick. I'm a tech engineer.
Thank you.
Sharif, you've testified as a professional engineer in front of this board a number of times.
Yes.
We will accept his credentials. Just for the record, I need to let everyone know, we need to speak clearly into the mics. We're having a problem with the recording, so we're recording it on, what was it?
Live stream.
Live stream. So that's where we're gonna get all our recordings from, okay?
How am I doing so far?
You're doing wonderful.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Chairman.
Mr. Ali, just for housekeeping purposes, you have previously appeared and qualified as an expert in the area of professional engineering before this board. Since last you appeared and so qualified, have your credentials been detrimentally affected at all?
Not at all.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vignola. Sharif, if you could familiarize the board with where the property is located and the prior approvals that were granted by the board and the current condition of the site.
Sure. So we're still on, the site is still on Union Hill Road, bordering Manalapan Township. So it's still the 17.5 acres, same wetlands, same flooding, same flood line. You heard that back in 2016 and 17 secured use variance and preliminary the whole entire site, as well as in 2017 final for Phase 1. Phase 1 is pretty much the majority of the site, 90% of the construction. If you're out there traveling on Union Hill Road, you will see the construction along the road, the sidewalks, the curb, the landscaping, the fence that was already there and was moved and to be readjusted. On site, the detention basin, the 2 detention basin, all the storm lines, all the curbings on site with the exception in the area of the 2 future 14,000 square feet mini warehouse. There's 2 mini warehouses. So we're supposed to be coming here just seeking a final for the 2 mini warehouses. However, that during the construction of Phase 1, Versusa building, the landscaping, the hardscaping building, they realized that through their structural engineer that the existing building, which is 5,000 square feet building, is not suitable. And structurally, it's not sound. So they decided to go with a smaller building. And that's not the reason we're here for the smaller building, because we wouldn't be here. The smaller building is, when what you see on the plan is only 4,100 square feet. But the reason is that it's a high ceiling. When they put these square footage for when they put the area for the office inside, they realize that there is, on top of that, there is more space. And if you look at any warehouse out there, you look from the outside, you see it's 1 story, but inside the office is two levels. So we call it the floor level and the mezzanine level. So they decided, since it's already framed, that they use that space at the top, and that's the reason we are here, to legalize that second floor, because it will look silly if you walk inside and not to use that. So it's extra space for the office, basically. Still the same 10 employees for the for Pursusa operation. Still the same number of employees for the mini warehouses, 32 employees, total of 42. So we're not talking about adding traffic or adding a number of employees or adding additional parking spaces. We're just here to legalize that second or the mezzanine floor. So in numbers, and I don't want to confuse you, you approved 1,520 square feet for an office. What the building on the ground floor is 1,128, it's less. But when you add the second floor or the mezzanine, that becomes 2,256 square feet. So that's an increase, as Mr. Klauser says, that's an increase of 736 square feet. However, you gotta look at the footprint of the building with less, with 4,100 square feet footprint on the ground, where it used to be 5,000. From the outside, you will see a smaller building, but again, you know, the reason that we're here, because we increased the square footage of the office space inside, and it makes sense for anyone. So that's pretty much the reason for that. There is no, that would not really trigger any increase in parking spaces, maybe one. However, if you remember, we had, what's required is 83 spaces. We have 96 spaces. So here again, you know, so it shouldn't be an issue at all. Same layout for the hardscaping as you approved. Nothing changed on the ground as far as site improvements. We're just here to legalize that mezzanine floor. That's pretty much it. I can, you know, burden you with the lot of square footage and lot of numbers. I'll leave that up to you. But the bottom line is that we have less of a footprint, 4,100 from 5,000 square feet, and we have increased the inside, the office inside by 736. But if you look at the total square footage of the building, adding the increase of the mezzanine, we're only talking about an increase of overall of 228 square feet. That's like 12 by 20 or less than that of a room. So that's it. That's what this application seeking final for the 2 mini warehouses and legalize that mezzanine floor by increasing the square footage.
Sharif, can you give the board some sense of where the site improvements are constructed for phase 1? I think you just recently went through it.
Yeah, so if you're out there, the board at the time, we were, as well as the applicant, were so sensitive to the neighbors in Manalapan, and you asked us to construct a fence, privacy fence, that's in, as well as the landscaping along the road and along Manalapan border, that's all in. We also did the improvement along the road. The only thing as far as the improvement along the road is the top coat. But the reason that we could not do that, because here again, we're waiting for PSE&G to move their utility pole. So hopefully soon you will be doing that and we'll do the top coat, and that's it. Everything on the outside will be done. The inside, the whole entire site is stabilized. Sub bays, the 2 detention basins in place, they are functioning. Connection to the outside storm pipes already in. Curbing, storm, septic is in, well is in, the building is up, and we would like to occupy the building. So everything inside
I would say on the ground, it appears to be almost 90% done. What's not done is the top coating of the blacktop and the stoplight space. And as a matter of fact, today I was out there and I was doing bond reduction, and we're very, very close to finish everything, with the exception, obviously, of phase 2, which is just the 2 buildings. Put the 2 buildings up. Everything around the 2 buildings is already taken care of.
And the 2 mini warehouse buildings that we're seeking final for this evening, there's been no change to their parking layout, the layout of the buildings, size of the buildings are exactly the same as they were shown on your preliminary approval.
Size of the building, the maximum number of tenant inside the building is 4, total 8 for the 2 buildings. Same square foot for the office, for each office. Same parking layout, same designated loading and unloading area as you recommended through Mr. Remps at the time in when we appeared before you in phase 1. The only thing is not up, and it goes along with phase 2, is the ID sign, the project sign out there. And once we get our approval, put the sign up.
And Sharif, in the prior approval, there were a list of uses that were permitted, that were agreed upon with this board for the mini warehouses. They're identified in the resolution. We're not asking to modify those uses in any way or request any further relief with regard to those uses.
Absolutely. Same users, and that is on the cover sheet, as well as the hour of operation is the same, as well as the list of equipment is still the same. Nothing changed. Everything is still the same.
Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions for Mr. Ali. This is a pretty straightforward final application, but we're seeking to utilize some additional office space that's available, and that does trigger a use variance. So if Mr. Ali is available to the board and your professionals for any questions you may have.
Do you have any other witnesses?
I
that
do.
will
I have
come
Frank
forward?
Anticel as a professional planner. He-
I think we should move through the process, get everyone up, and then
Absolutely,
everyone can
sir.
gather their thoughts and get the questions out.
Frank, if you could join us. Sharif, stay close by.
If you could raise your right hand, do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address for the record, please.
Sure. It's Frank Antisell, Antisell, and I'm with the firm Accurate Engineering, PC, and we're at 12 Concord Drive, Kendall Park, New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I'm offering Mr. Anticel as a professional planner, so Frank, if you could share with the board your education and your professional.
Sure. I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in Engineering from Widener University. I have a Master's degree from Stevens Institute of Technology. I'm a licensed professional engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey, and I've testified before this board and other boards over the last 28 years.
Okay, counsel, we will accept his credentials as a professional.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Frank, you heard the testimony of Mr. Ali. The applicant is requesting some additional office space, which triggers a use variance. If you could just share with the board a little bit of the research that you've done and the proofs that are necessary to give this board the opportunity to grant the approval.
Sure. The site is located in the NC Neighborhood Commercial District. We're in the landscaping / hardscaping business, with mini warehouses is not a permitted use. The site previously received use variance approval in 2007 for a granite supply and fabrication business, and then in 2017 for the use that we're here for tonight. The reason we're here tonight is for a minor change in the building associated with the landscaping / hardscaping business. The change is the second floor office. The reason for the change is when the applicant went to renovate the building, they found out there were no footings to the building, and therefore it wasn't structurally sound. So rather than, they thought it would be better to build a new building based on their professionals' opinions. So they got a permit to demolish the building, which the town gave, and then they applied for a permit to build the building, which they received the permit. Then when they went to build the second story office is when everything stopped. When you look at the old building that was there, it was not in character. It was an old dilapidated building. The new building is more of like a pole barn looking building, which definitely fits more in the character for this area. The board will take note that the second floor office doesn't change the footprint of the building. And actually, as Mr. Ali had noted to the board, our overall footprint of the building decreased with the new building. So our footprint is less. So the only thing we're here for is the additional square footage that's inside the building. The project requires a D1 use variance, which it had previously received, and per the Medici standards, we have to show that the site is specifically suited for the use. On the positive criteria of the new building, a pole barn is much more attractive and in character with the surrounding area. It's also safer than the old building, which had a bad foundation. When you look at the intensity of the proposed use, it is less intensive than a lot of the permitted uses in the zone. Some of the permitted uses in the zone are a gasoline service station, a neighborhood shopping center, a restaurant. The proposed use would have less of an impact on the surrounding properties in the neighborhood. In addition, the site has an existing tree buffer, and the applicant has added berming, landscaping, and fencing. The applicant is not proposing to change the existing tree buffer. The existing tree buffer provides sufficient screening to the adjacent residential properties. Therefore, we believe the site is specifically suited for this use. When looking at the special reasons to support this variance, it is consistent with many of the stated purposes of the municipal land use law. NJSA 40:55D70, including sections A, promotes the general welfare, section G, provides sufficient space in a particular area as it is located in a isolated neighborhood, and it is buffered by the trees from the residential neighborhood. And special reason I, promotion of an enhanced visual environment. When we look at the negative criteria, the only negative impacts we see were there was one bulk variance that was requested in this, and that was for the sign. And that was previously approved by the board, and a facade sign is allowed, whereas a freestanding sign is not allowed. So the board had previously approved the freestanding sign, and the main reason for that freestanding sign is so that people know where to turn in for the site, so they don't miss the site. That was the only negative impact that we had seen. Based on the board adding conditions that limit the uses that are allowed in the mini warehouses, we feel the board has done a good job by adding those and minimizing any negative impacts. We see that there's no negative impact to the zone ordinance and the zone plan, as shown by the previously approved uses on the site, and the proposed plan has reduced the negative impacts on the surrounding uses by adding the fence, adding the buffer, adding the landscaping, and adding the berm.
Frank, in your analysis of the use variance that was previously approved by this board for the use, the addition of the 736 or so square foot of office building, does that particular addition have any negative impacts or modifications to the overall use that was previously granted by the board?
Not that I can see, because again, if you were standing outside, you wouldn't even know that the additional space was there.
The reduction in the footprint, less impervious, or a reduced footprint is certainly better than the larger footprint that was previously approved by the board.
I would say so, yes.
And the board's conditions, which were placed in the record at the time of the preliminary, including the buffering that you mentioned and all of those are not negatively affected in any way by the additional square footage used by the applicant.
No.
And it's the applicant's commitment to the board that square footage is only to be used for their business, and it's not to be rented out or utilized by any other businesses.
That is correct.
And as Mr. Ali stated, it doesn't increase the number of employees, it just provides an opportunity to have a more spacious office.
That's correct.
I have no further questions for Mr. Anticel. He and Mr. Ali are available to the board and the board's professionals for any questions they may have.
That's your final witness?
That is our last witness, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we're gonna start off, before we get to any board members, we're gonna start off with Mika. Mika, please, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Plaza.
Please talk into the mic, Mika.
I'm going to refer to CME memo of June 14th, 2022. Forgive me if I am asking questions that were probably approved earlier, but I just want to understand what was approved earlier and what is with this application. I understand everything in terms of uses and conditions as were approved in 2017 are to be complied with and to remain as is. Question regarding the parking. I believe the statement is that there are 96 parking spaces. However, I want to clarify, does that include 83 car spaces as well as 13 what we call the oversized truck parking spaces? Is that what we are counting as 99? So technically for the car parking spaces, it's only 83, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And are you proposing any EV spaces on the site?
Well, now is the law, so if we require to make 3 of them make ready, we will comply.
Okay, yeah, because as you know from my memo, I believe with the proposal as is, there are 85 car parking spaces required. You're providing 83. I'm not counting the 13 truck parking spaces as car spaces. And if the EV spaces are provided, you would be complying in terms of number of spaces.
And I think we looked at your memo and agreed that we would comply with those make-ready spaces, and then we would achieve the bonus that's provided. And so no variance relief would be required.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. In terms of, sorry, I'm jumping through my applications. For my clarification, the small squares that are on the 2 sides of the proposed landscape business, are those storage bins in addition to the storage bins that are, the 7 storage bins that are approved along the Union Hill frontage?
I think you're talking about the ballots for the bricks.
No, the small squares you can
Yeah.
see over there, those are those
Yeah, that's just the pallets for the
for the material
Yeah, it's
storage?
a hardscaping business.
Okay.
Talking about right here.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Sharif, can you hold your microphone closer?
So all that was part of the previous approval, right?
Yeah, and it's in a resolution.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure I understand. I believe we had requested, would you be agreeing to provide the floor plans of the proposed landscaping business in order to make sure how much area is office and how much area is, would be?
Yeah, I thought that was part of the submission too, right?
I have only,
I don't know. I'll just interrupt Sharif and Mika, pardon me. I don't know if it was part of this submission. I think it might have been part of the prior submissions for preliminary, but we can provide those plans.
okay, thank you.
We had them, because Sharif utilized them to lay out the site.
Okay, thanks. In terms of the compliance with the airport safety zone and flood hazard conservation, that still remains, and you would be complying with all the requirements as per the previous approval in terms of, you know, I know you said the material storage and all is still remaining the same. I just wanted on record that that's going to be complied with.
Yeah, we do have our letter of interpretation, and we do have all the permits from the state as far, you know, from the DEP. So that's already in place, and that's already been provided, and that's the reason we are in constructions.
Yeah, no, I understand that. The
But
property is also in the airport safety overlay zone.
Yes.
And I think part of the requirement are the tenants, especially of the mini warehouses, have to make sure that there is no kind of flammable or toxic gases. I'm assuming that was agreed to in 2017. I just want to make sure that still remains with this approval.
Yes.
Thank you. In terms of the phase 2, the mini warehouses, I'm just trying to understand what is the space between the building warehouse and the parking spaces? Is that going to be some kind of sidewalk, or why is bollards being proposed and it not?
Well, you don't want to have the spaces right at the building, so you create what we call, it's like a walk area. It's like about 4 or 6 feet of walk area.
But is that being proposed as a walk area? Because right now it's not indicated with any
Well,
kind
it's
of.
part of the blacktop, so it's, yeah, you get out of the car, just like a typical mini warehouse, and you have the pollards, or you have the concrete stoppers, and that's the walk area in front of it.
Okay, typically in a building, I mean, I know in a commercial building you see some kind of, a walkway with a different material or anything.
But this is, you have overhead doors, and you have to get trucks in and out the building, so you cannot have a curb, you cannot have a sidewalk, so it's a typical layout of a mini warehouse, pretty much.
Especially when you're loading and offloading
Right.
materials for the trucks. It's better if you have solid blacktop, so you're not stepping up onto a sidewalk.
But there are bollards too. You can't just
Right, you can go
pull over to the.
between the bollards with a hand truck or walking, yes.
It's a similar product. A similar product we have here in Monroe. It's Tommy Reagan's site. If you go there, you'll see exactly what we have.
I mean,
It's on Pasamahalo Road. So
it doesn't. There's no differentiation over there other than the bollards being proposed. But I just wanted to point out that. And then the tractor trailer, that's the parking space right in between. Was that also approved preliminary, just to be? What is
Yeah.
that intended for? Like big
And
trucks?
That was part of my testimony. That was a recommendation of previous planner, Mr. Ramsey, where designate an area for a loading or unloading area.
Okay, so I understand that because that's in the middle of the drive aisle. That truck parking is intended to be off hours, or is it going to be?
Well,
how
if
do
you-
you intend that place to
Well,
be?
if you notice that the drive aisle is it's not a typical 24 or 26 feet. It's about
Yeah.
40 feet or more.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be in the way, but most likely we don't anticipate tractor trailer coming in. Most likely it's just a box truck, but they will have the room if they decided to come in. So it's not going to be in the way of the traffic at all.
Okay. Now going back to the landscaping business, what is that dumpster area parking? Like, are we storing dumpster areas there,
It's
or what?
not really a landscaping business.
Okay.
It's a hardscaping business. They do brick pavers and concrete works. So the dumpsters, the all empty dumpsters, so they take them to a specific site whenever it's ready, and they just bring them empty.
Okay, so those will be the 4 empty dumpsters with one, kind of in tandem. Is that?
That's right. Yeah, it's just a storage for dumpsters.
Okay. In terms of the lighting, I'm assuming that was approved during the phase 1 and phase 2 and nothing has really changed. Was the entire lighting to remain on, or are you intending to 50% of the lights to be dimmed when it's off hours or things like that? Can that be worked out just to be environmentally friendly?
Yeah, that was part of the testimony for preliminary and final phase 1. But yeah, we can. I'll be honest with you, I haven't looked at the lighting specification, but I'm pretty sure that we did comply with the ordinance. But as far as off hours, yeah, after hours there will be just security lights there.
Yeah.
Maybe 1 or 2 lights at the entrance to be on 24 hours just for security, no more than that.
I would ask that be identified on the lighting plan. Currently, we didn't see that.
We'll work with you also.
I think I think those were it. Thank you, Chairman.
That's it?
If I could ask Sharif, could I just ask Sharif one question? Sharif, just as a general answer to all of Ms. Apte's questions, that layout, the parking, the truck storage, that space in between the building and the bollards, the lighting, all of that is the same as what was previously approved by the board at the time of preliminary?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. That's all I wanted to ask.
Okay. Mark, any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get to my report, what are the hours of operation?
They're actually in the resolution.
Cover sheet.
They're on the cover sheet. I believe it's Monday through Friday is 7 to 6, and Saturday is 7 to 2.
And that's consistent with the preliminary?
That's what's in the resolution and preliminary, and I think Mika put it in her report.
Thank you. I'm referring to my June 23rd, 2022 review letter. This is a second review on this application. It's amended, preliminary and final for Phase 1 and final for Phase 2. The amendment, as Mr. Ali spoke about concerning the building, I refer to it in my letter. On your plan, it says it's a one-story building. I know it was indicated it's a one-story with a mezzanine. The architectural plans indicate it's a two-story. So let's just get that squared away. I think it's a two-story building, and if we're agreeing with the architects,
It is one story, just like any warehouse, but we'll have the architect to revise his plans and submit.
so with
it
that
as
said,
one.
then let's get all the documents in order to be whatever you're claiming it is, a one-story with a mezzanine.
Certainly.
So the architectural plans will have to be revised
Absolutely.
and resubmitted. Right-of-way dedication, I'm not sure if that's been provided yet under Phase 1, but if not, we want to get the right-of-way dedication to the township cleared
Sure.
up. You are doing those improvements out there, so there was a minor dedication. Let's just verify that that's been dedicated, and if not, we'll clean it up. Our planner spoke about the airport safety overlay zone. We do need to see a copy of that approval, that it includes these warehouses. I don't recollect if we just received it for Phase 1, but if not, you'll provide that.
Yes.
Will do.
And also, how are you going to enforce in the mini warehouses that they're not storing anything in the warehouses that are in violation of the airport safety zone?
It could be in the leases, the lease agreements with them.
Okay. Is that a document or something, wording you can provide to the
Mr. Vignola, yes, I
review
can.
as well? Thank you.
Would that also include the hours of operation too? Because the hours that you're outlaying is for their business. Would that imply to the business that's
Yeah.
coming in as well?
In the resolution of approval, the hours of operations apply both to Brazus's business and the mini warehouses, and yes, that can also be included in the lease agreement.
Sorry, Mo.
And I list the outside agencies again. They may have been provided under Phase 1 and includes Phase 2. We would need to have copies of those all submitted for Phase 2.
Will do.
And with that, a few other minor cleanup items in my review letter. Are you agreeable to all the comments in my review letter?
Yes.
Thank you. And let's see. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any board members that have any questions? Mr. Lupo?
I have a question for Mr. Ali. When you testified, you said that the square footage was 4,100 square feet, is that correct?
Yes.
On the plan it's showing 4,000, which one is it?
It's 4,100 square feet.
We need to make that change, okay?
It's 82 by 50, yes.
Any other questions, Mr. Lupo?
Nope, that's it, I'm sorry.
Any
Thank
other
you.
board members have questions? Carol?
How many employees would be in the office again?
So the hardscaping business, that's 10 employees, and the future 2 building, the maximum that we stated on the record, 32.
32?
Yes, total of 42.
That's it.
Any other questions? Seeing there's none, we're gonna open this and this application only up to the public. Anyone from the public wishing to be heard on this particular application, come forward. I'm gonna ask you to please take a seat back. We're gonna let anyone from the public sit there. So, young sir, come on up. Right there, please.
Oh, the other side.
Mr. Clauser, you could continue to sit there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sir, if I could just have you state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address, please, for the record.
Sure. It's Matthew. Last name is Hrevnak. Address is 13 Pine Tree Lane in Manalapan. I'm on a property that basically is adjacent to the property in question. I actually was here about 5 years ago, and I got to say, one of the things I asked for was a fence be put up, trees be taken down that were growing too tall, and I got to say, they've been a good neighbor. I don't have any major concerns. I do have some questions. Number one, has there been a traffic study? I know you're talking now about 85 cars and 16 trucks. I've lived there over 30 years. I'm a walker. Believe me, there's people that fly down Union Hill Road. In addition to that, you guys put up structures on Mount Mills Road. There's a bunch of new apartment condo complexes there. So the increase in traffic and the way to get to Route 9 from that area is down Union Hill Road or going down the other way down Texas Road. So the increase in traffic, I was just wondering if there was a traffic study done with this, because again, those are residential neighborhoods. There's kids, there's people walk their pets, and there's obviously people like myself that go walking all times of the day. Second thing I'd like to ask is the hours of operations. I was glad to hear. Again, we haven't had any major issues with noise. I do have a concern about the lighting, and I'm glad the question was asked. So when you have lighting and right now it's dark, it's beautiful to sleep at night. But now if we're gonna have lights, and while there's a tree buffer, that tree buffer is great at this time of the year when it's full of leaves. But when those leaves start falling in all winter and into the spring, there's no leaves. The buffer isn't there as it is now. Third thing, in terms of the building that's there, you're saying it's a 1 story with a mezzanine. That's a tall building. That's a tall building. I don't know what's considered 2 stories, 1 story with the mezzanine. But you can still overlook the houses on the other side, especially again when those leaves fall. I don't know what kind of windows are in there, how big the windows are, how high they are, but there are people that have children, and last thing we want is people looking over into our privacy. We do appreciate the fence that was put up, and that's great from our side looking over. We can hardly see over, and if you're at ground level, but when you're 2 stories up, you can see over. Question, there's a property across the street on Union Hill Road. Someone had mentioned to me in my development that that was also purchased. Is that the case? Then it's gonna be used by this facility? There's all new fencing, that's similar fencing to what's up there, so.
Not to our knowledge, nothing came before us at this point, so we couldn't comment on it, but as far as we know, they're here for this application,
Okay.
which was previously approved, just so you are aware. They're just coming in to modify an existing building that when they started their work, they found to be unstable, so
I
it was
understand.
removed.
Yeah, like I said, it's very recently. There's been a fence put up there. I know they were clearing stuff out directly across the street on Union Hill Road. Has there been any consideration given to thinking of putting a stoplight up at the corner of Englishtown Road and Union Hill? Again, there's traffic that's coming, especially when the auction is open on the weekends. And thank God we don't have as big an issue at Raceway Park because it's not being used to the capacity it was before. I'll be honest with you, I will be going to Manalapan's also to have a stoplight put up on Pension Road in Union Hill. That's called Accident Alley for those of us that live there. Having stoplights on both ends of that will reduce big time the speeding that goes on. I've seen people going 50, 60 miles an hour down that road, and that's a 30-mile-an-hour zone. And there's that little overpass there, right next to the property there with the little stream that goes. And right now, the pavement has sunken, so there's a bump there. So I don't know if there's gonna be any repair done to that, but if you're gonna have trucks coming in there, that's gonna damage that road even further. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Chairman, if I
Mark?
could just respond to a
Yes,
couple of the
please-
items.
please do so.
Middlesex County and Monroe Township are in the process of installing a traffic light at Mounts Mills and Englishtown Road. So that is coming. It's in the land acquisition process. Once the land's acquired, then it'll be out to bid, but it is designed by Middlesex County. They are the lead agency on it.
Great, thank you.
So once that goes in, then the intersection at Union Hill will be much better, will function much better. As far as the property across the street, if you have some questions on it or if there's some concerns, you can reach out to our zoning office and speak to our zoning officer on it. He may have some information on that, but that's not part of this application.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I hope that helps. And the bridge, I will reach out to Middlesex County. We do get some settlement right at the bridge deck, and that sounds like what you're speaking about. So I'll reach out to them to get that repaired as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to be heard on this application? Please come forward.
Good evening. If you could just state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address, please.
Elizabeth Fagan, Fagan, 21 Woodcrest Circle, Monroe Township, New Jersey. I missed part of it, but you're asking for variances, correct?
There's an amendment to the previously approved use variance.
Peter, just.
Yeah, but
Oh, sorry.
You have the wrong application.
No, I don't. So if they're asking for variances, then they're asking against the master plan. So ordinances are, as you know, set up because those are our town's rules. So why are we constantly, for every developer, bending them? I mean, Cranberry Road looks like Las Vegas with the signs now. We've let developers put signs that are huge. We have to say no. Just no. That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Can I go back up just one more question?
Sure, come on up.
Sorry about that.
If you could just identify yourself quickly again for the record.
Sure. Matthew Revnak,
Still on the road.
HREVNAK, 13 Pine Tree Lane, Manalapan. Yeah, in the letter we received, is the question I forgot. It mentions about the number of driveways. That was never addressed here. It does say based off the township engineer. I'm just curious how many driveways they're looking and where they're gonna put them. Obviously, you can't go on the other side coming out because that's wetlands and a stream. Is there gonna be multiple driveways going into the facility?
I'm sorry, what are you referring to?
The letter I got, the legal notice?
my legal notice.
I'll let the applicant explain.
Yeah, I can probably speak to that. At the time of the original application, the board had a different planner, but the layout for the site was approved with just one driveway, which is there. There's no additional driveway proposed. The board's current planner identified that there's a section of the ordinance that either is I don't know if it's a design waiver or a variance, that the number of driveways should be decided by the township engineer. So when I do a legal notice, I have to make sure I go overboard. So out of an abundance of caution, I included that as a potential variance relief if the board deemed that was required, to have the number of driveways decided by Mr. Razumowitz's office. But in actuality, the entire layout of the site, and even to address some of your questions before with regard to the lighting and the traffic, were addressed by this board at the time of preliminary, and it was approved with the one driveway, and there are no other additional driveways proposed.
Okay, because actually, personally, I don't think it's a bad idea to have some kind, even if it's a small one, in the case of an emergency. That can always be a problem. If you need to get an emergency vehicle and then something blocks the main entrance, it's always good to have some alternate way to get in and out. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public wishing to be heard? Come forward, please.
Good evening. If you could just state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address, please.
Sure. Eileen Glynn, Glynn, 32 Forest Drive, Manalapan.
So
I
you
have
know-
some concerns because have listed from Google that there's two businesses in there besides, there's Brazusa and something called GDL Dumpsters. And I'm wondering if that's correct, because that supposedly is a waste hazardous business, which I have concerns of, being it's so close to neighborhood, neighborhood people around something that's hazmat. And I have seen those dumpsters coming in and out for the past several years, all day long, not empty, but full. So I have a concern with what's coming into that yard and where is it going. And I did have another concern, is the quality of life of the residential people in that area. I live across the street from it. I'm not behind it, I'm across the street from it. And I have to tell you that I spend my days listening to excessive noise, let's put it that way, of crushed up concrete being dumped here, moved here. So it's an all-day thing from the time they start to the time they end in the day, that it's constant noise. Now, I'm sorry, other businesses that would be in that area that are neighborhood commercial would not be of that kind of noise. I find that it does affect the quality of life of people that live there to have this. And to add more businesses in there, that means more trucks coming in, more cars going in and out on that road. And I find that affects me and my neighbors. And I think that's it. But if someone can answer my question about what GDL dumpsters are and why is there hazmat and so close to a neighborhood?
Yeah. The only business there is Brazusa. There, I don't know why GDL and some sort of hazardous material is showing up.
It shows right up on Google when you put in the address that it is a minority women-owned corporation that simplifies and facilitates the transfer of solid waste and environmental services through dumpster rentals. We are a family operated and owned.
That's not a use I'm asking for. That's not a use that's permitted at the site. And the
But
zone.
it's saying that that's there.
I can't speak to what Google is saying, but that's not what we're doing.
So that's not there.
No.
It's on the record that it's not there. It's on the record that it's not going to be there.
Okay.
And again, I will concur with counsel. I don't, there's a lot of manipulating in this world today. Anyone can get anything on anything, and they may have penetrated Google at some point to get that in, but you're hearing it today in front of all of us. It's not there, and it shouldn't be there.
Okay, that sounds good to me. But like again, my other concern was the noise. And I don't know, I will not say that it's Brazusa because it's in the middle of the night, but between the hours of 2:30 in the morning and 3:15 on a Friday, several times a month, a huge truck goes in there or is on around that road right there and dumps. And you can hear that bang from the back of the dumpster and you can hear it pulling away. But by the time you could call police, they'd be gone. By the time I could get out there and take a picture, they're gone. And it's right there at where Brazusa is. So that to me is not between the hours of 7 and 6. And I don't think there's any excuse for it. I don't care if they have to dump, that's not where they should be dumping it. It's a neighborhood.
Mr. Chairman,
A few comments, yes.
let me
Mark?
jump in. Perhaps Peter can clarify again what the dumpsters are used for.
Sure.
Or Mr. Ali.
Well, yeah, I'll let, to the extent that we went through this at the time of preliminary, I'll just remind the board, and if you want to get an actual fact witness to put it on, I could certainly do that too. But they have their own empty dumpsters that they bring to and from the site, or maybe not empty if there's concrete material, but they're not garbage dumpsters. They're not waste materials. It's the leftover pavers that are brought back or broken up. And actually I've had to represent them with regard to what the steps they have to go through to actually dump the concrete. You can't bring it to landfills. It has to be brought to recycling facilities and things like that. So that's the kind of waste that they bring in and out.
Okay.
My concern was not about what was in there, it was the time of night when they were coming.
Again, we went through this at nauseum with the board for a good reason. To address the public comments that were there at the time of preliminary, that there are limited hours. I spoke with my client today. I said, have you been cited for any violations? And she indicated no. And they commit to continue to abide by those hours of operation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counsel, would it be, could we have the owner come up and just testify to that?
Absolutely.
To put everyone at ease, so it's on the record, if that's okay?
Sure. And we're looking for confirmation that we're abiding by the hours of
The hours of the
operation.
business, and there's no one dumping at night, and there's no hazardous or any type of waste going on?
If I could just have you raise your right hand for me? Do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address for the record, slide up closer to the microphone so they can hear you.
Okay, my first name is Helene, Helayne. Last name Queiroz.
Helene, Brazusa Construction is your family business, you and your husband?
Yes, we started 2002. Yes, 20 years on the business.
You don't want me yelling at you.
I hate microphones.
See, you've heard, don't be nervous.
Okay.
The chairman has
hate
asked very
microphones.
reasonably, just for you to confirm,
Okay.
that
That's word.
you agree to the hours of operation, that you know
Yes.
that they're 7 to 6 Monday through Friday.
Yes,
And 7 to
Saturday,
2 on
7 to
Sunday.
2. Yes, we all behave. After we got the first approval for the township, we don't have any notification. We never have a dumpster work at night, and we work during the hours time between Monday to Friday, 7 to 6, and Saturday, 7 to 2.
Okay. And you don't have a hazardous waste company that's utilizing your facility?
No, the containers is for the debris come for the side jobs, It's an old concrete, GGA, bricks, Belgian block, is this type debris for the containers.
Right. And
That's
then-
what we have over there. No garbage, nothing.
And then you take those containers to sites where you can dump them?
Yes. And now, I'm sorry the neighbors for the noise. I don't know, during the day, we under construction, so you can see my husband sometimes working the road, the new curb, new sidewalk, digging cups. JCPL is there, change the pole. I know it's annoying, but that's how it works. I'm sorry. I hope this done soon.
Okay, that's good enough for me. Is that good enough for the board members? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Professionals have any additional comments with respect to that? No? Okay, anyone else from the public wishing to be heard on this application? Seeing there's none, I make a motion to close the public portion. Do I
So
have a
moved.
motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor of closing the public portion?
Aye.
Public portion is now closed. Okay, board members, we have a previous approved application before us. They're looking to amend their existing building, which was found to be unstructurally suitable or safe, so it needed to be renovated. They also agreed that they would address the site lighting with our township engineer to mitigate any light that may overflow or add some night lighting. They also were gonna clarify the story of the building, whether it's 1 or 2, or is it 1 with a mezzanine? And also the square footage of the building. So you have the application in front of you. We need a yay or a nay to move forward with what's been brought before us.
I'll make a motion.
To the mic, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the application under the, under the auspices that they all, all the professionals', notes be met. Thank you.
And the second?
I'll second
Second by Mr. Busman. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Ms. Damiani?
Yes.
Mr. Lupo?
Yes.
Mr. Busman?
Yes.
Ms. Caratori?
Yes.
Mr. Tanzi?
Yes.
Mr. Jaffe?
Yes.
Chairman LaFata?
Yes.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Okay, everybody, we're gonna take 5 minutes. Have the other applicant a minute, two, to get up here, get set up, have their stenographer set up. And, if anyone needs to use the restroom, now's the time. Thank you. Okay, our next applicant is BA-5217-20, BSREP Third Monroe LLC, represented by Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, if it's appropriate, I'll begin. First, for the record, my name is Bob Smith. I'm a licensed attorney in the state of New Jersey, and I'm here tonight representing BizRep Roman numeral 3 in an application for a ring road. All right? That's it in a nutshell. So we're seeking...
Mr. Smith, before you proceed...
Yes, sir.
I want on the record that we would like a copy of the transcript from the stenographer, please.
At no charge.
Of course.
We'll be happy to provide it.
Okay, thank you.
So we're here tonight seeking an amended preliminary and an amended final site plan approval for this project, which has been through the board about 5 times. So it's been pretty thoroughly reviewed. And what we're proposing tonight, as I mentioned, is the completion of a ring road around the property. And we are proposing it because it will improve circulation, make it possible to have more than one tenant, and also it's very good for the marketability of the project. If you've passed that area of the town, you know the building's almost up, all right, looking good. We are seeking a parking variance. The parking is going from 521 to 556, and that actually is more conforming on the parking variance side than it was the last time. You were kind enough to give us a variance for 521, so we're increasing it a little bit. We are also reducing the number of loading docks from 216 to 208. We're also reducing the trailer parking from 143 spaces to 111. And we are asking for 2 de minimis, we believe, bulk variances for the project. And I mentioned the one, but I'll give you the actual numbers. One is a parking variance. The parking variance under the Monroe Township parking ratios, the parking that would be required is 1,747 spaces. The last time we were here, actually 2 times ago that we were here, you were kind enough to give us a parking variance for 521, and tonight we're still a parking variance, but we're actually making it more conforming. We're going to 556. The second variance is lot coverage. We are proposing 61.7% for lot coverage. 35% is required. And again, in terms of the history of this, you were kind enough to give us an approval for 59.8% in one of the previous times before. And of course, as you understand, the increasing lot coverage is related to the ring road. It's my intention, Mr. Chairman, to call 3 witnesses tonight. The first one will be Mr. Dean Conrad, who's seated to my right, representing BizRep 3. Our second one will be Kristen Rosland, who's a licensed PE, and she's worked on all the prior iterations, but the engineer that was here was a fellow named Dan Miola. She's always done all the work, and he does the talking, so tonight she'll be doing some of the talking. He's on vacation. And then finally, we have Matt Flynn, our licensed professional engineer, to provide, our licensed professional planner. It's a terrible thing to call him that. And he will provide the justification under the municipal land use law to provide a justification for the granting of the bulk variances. So with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that Mr. Dean Conrad, seated to my right, be called and sworn so that he can give testimony.
If you could raise your right hand, sir, do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but
Yes,
the truth?
sir.
If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address for the record, please.
Dean Conrad, C-O-N-R-A-D, 1 Meadowland Plaza, East Rutherford, New Jersey.
Okay, Mr. Conrad, for the record, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
So I'm employed by Brookfield Properties, and I'm a development manager.
Okay. And you've been responsible for this warehouse project for the last 7 months?
That's correct.
Okay. I think the board is probably tired of hearing about Brookfield Properties, who is the parent company and all this. But give us, if you wouldn't mind, 20 seconds on Brookfield.
Brookfield Properties is a large international real estate investment and asset manager, global reach, and it develops multiple assets from warehouse logistics to apartments to large office spaces.
Okay, and that's worldwide, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, tonight, in my introduction, I mentioned to the board that we want to provide some additional circulation on this ring road on the south side of the building. Why? Why are we asking for it?
Well, we want to improve internal circulations for a multiple tenancy operation. And at this point, we don't have a tenancy at this point.
Okay. So this would allow you to open it up to, right now, one tenant, it works very well.
Right.
But this would allow it to be 2 tenants or even potentially 3 tenants, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And is it also true that your tenants may want a secured truck court? And does this also aid in that pursuit?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
What was that, a secured what?
Truck court. Dean, why don't you describe that for what that is? A secured truck court, if you can. Oh, you know what red means go?
Yeah.
Is it on?
Yeah, so a secured truck court means that there's a fence with a guard.
All right. And that's an attractive feature to some
Yes, it is.
lessees, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I mentioned to you that we're increasing the car parking from 521 to 556 spaces. That's correct?
That's correct.
And it does make us more conforming to the ordinance, true?
Correct.
Okay. And we are reducing the number of loading docks from 216 to 208?
Correct.
Okay. And then we're reducing the trailer parking from 143 to 111 spaces. Is that also true?
Correct.
All right. Now, here's the big one. Because, and you saw it in the prior application, the board wants to know, is there going to be any additional traffic, any additional noise, any additional congestion, any change in shifts, or any changes in the hours of operation? And that's a yes or no answer.
No.
There's not going to be any of that. And the reason for that, are we even proposing a 1 square inch increase in the footprint of the building?
No.
No, the building stays absolutely as is. This is all about having that additional circulation, which provides for those benefits: marketability, safety, more flexible operation, and the possibility of more than one tenant, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, do we have a signed lease? I'm sure Mr.
No, we
LaFata,
don't. No, we do not.
but are we looking hard?
Yes, we are.
All right. And do you see a lease in the future?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Mr. Conrad's available for questions.
We'll continue with your witnesses, please.
Okay. If you'd step down, Mr. Conrad, I'd like to ask that our professional engineer be called Kristen Rosalind. I'd ask that she be sworn so that she can give testimony.
If you could raise your right hand for me, do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Kristen Rosland, Roslund, and the address is 300 Kimball Drive in Parsippany, New Jersey.
Okay. And, I previously mentioned you were the brains behind all the prior applications. Dan is on vacation, so I think the board would like to know about your credentials as a professional engineer.
Sure, Bob is very generous, but I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I graduated from the College of New Jersey with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, and I've worked on projects like this, as well as other industrial projects with Langen for over 10 years.
Right. And in particular, on this project, the BizRep project, you have been in the center of the engineering work on this project, correct?
Correct.
So you're thoroughly familiar with the project. So if you would...
We will accept our credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you would, Ms. Rosalind, tell us what's different between this and the prior approvals that the board granted.
Sure. So as Bob mentioned, the application is for what we're calling a circulation road on the southern portion of the site, known as Block 82, Lot 3.01 in Monroe Township, and Block 19, Lots 2, 3.01, and 3.02 in South Brunswick. And as Mr. Conrad mentioned, the purpose of this is really to increase operational efficiency and to better accommodate a multi-tenant scenario. And as we know and have heard, we have an approved warehouse development that received preliminary and final site plan approval and will generally remain unchanged as part of this application. So I have two exhibits over here. The left one, which we'll call A1, is the approved warehouse development. And the one on the right, which we'll call A2, is the proposed warehouse with the site plan modifications for the circulation.
All right, so let me ask. Yeah, we better mark it. Thanks. All right, and if you would put not only A1 and the A2, but also tonight's date on it.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And Mr. Chairman, do you think it'd be advisable to try to tilt those a little bit so they're parallel to the wall? Maybe make sure that the audience can see what's going on.
We can do that. We will also give everyone an opportunity to take a peek when the time is right.
Do we want to do a little twist, if you don't mind, right now, just so that they're parallel to the wall, so people can see what when you talk about something, you'll be able to see what it is. That's great, actually. Great. Lovely. So A1 is the before, A2 we hope will be the after.
Correct.
All right, what are the differences?
So again, the proposed application in front of you generally consists of a circulation road on the southern portion of the site. And this consists of an additional 1.6 acres of impervious coverage, which increases the impervious coverage on site from 59.8% to 61.7%, for which the applicant is seeking relief from this board tonight. This additional impervious coverage will be managed with 2 of the stormwater basins on site, as well as 7 manufactured treatment devices to comply with local and state stormwater regulations. Now, there were a couple of minor site plan modifications done on the southern portion of the site. As Mr. Smith indicated before, there was a reduction in the overall number of loading spaces on site from 216 to 208, as well as a reduction in the number of trailer parking spaces from 143 to 111 to provide a few additional curb cuts into the southern truck court. And then in addition to that, you had heard before that we increased the number of car parking spaces, but we also shifted the location of the car parking spaces. So if you look from Exhibit A1 to Exhibit A2, on Exhibit A1, the car parking was actually located to the south of the truck access drive, so pedestrians had to cross that access road to get into the building. We've now shifted that parking so it's adjacent to the building to kind of increase pedestrian safety, again, trying to make it a little bit more flexible for a multi-tenant scenario. And again, that increases the number of parking from 521 spaces to 556 spaces, which improves upon the prior variance that was granted by this board, since 1,747 spaces are required per code. So in addition to the changes to the parking counts, there were also minor modifications made to the sound wall on the southern portion of the site, as well as the eastern portion of the site, to accommodate this new layout. Overall, the height of the sound wall will remain at a minimum of 15 feet, which is consistent with the prior approval, but there were minor tweaks in the southeastern portion of the site to make room for this. With that being said, we have worked closely with the acoustical engineer on this project to ensure that the modified design still maintains and complies with the old approval and meets all local and state noise codes for the southern and eastern portions of the property.
And there was a noise study, I believe, presented as part of the application.
That is correct.
Okay. And it confirms, as you just said, that as a result of the sound wall, or even as a result of just distance, at the property line, the project will meet all requirements of the New Jersey Noise Control Act, correct?
Correct. And I will add to that, that the modifications had to be closely worked out with New Jersey Natural Gas because their easement goes kind of through that southeastern portion of the site. So it was closely coordinated with that, and we have their approval for these modifications already. So another aspect of the circulation road is lighting. Obviously, we want to light this because it's going to be a roadway used for internal operations. So we are proposing LED fixtures with a temperature of 4,000 Kelvin, and the lighting will be designed to meet minimum and maximum illumination levels, as well as pole heights. And then in addition to the new lights along the road, there were a few lights that had to be modified to accommodate the updated geometry for the parking layout. But overall, the lighting design was completed to comply with the township ordinance, with the exception of one technical waiver that we are requesting. It is for the average uniformity, which the township requires as 75%. This is very difficult to meet. It requires a lot of lights to kind of keep everything very bright and uniform throughout the road. And we felt that since the prior approval received relief from this, we wanted to be consistent with that. So we are asking for relief for that tonight because we are proposing 50% rather than the required 25, or rather than the 75%. And then I will also say that, industrial standards for uniformity are 25%, so we are above that, which, goes to kind of speak to industrial standards as well. And I am going to try to keep this short and sweet since Mr. Smith spoke a lot of what I was going to say. But just to recap, there is no proposed changes to the building, to the northern parking lot, to the parking lot on the western portion of the site adjacent to Cranberry South River Road. And there will be no increased traffic as a result of this because there's no additional warehouse area. The purpose of this application is really just to focus on the southern portion of the site and to increase the operational efficiency so that trucks do not have to go through the truck court to get from one end of the site to the other, given that it's very long, and to increase multi-tenant flexibility, like I said before, by adding that additional car parking and moving it closer to the building. So with that, I just want to thank you for your time, and I know we're going to hold questions to the end, but I'll...
Well, actually, you sometimes open it up beforehand,
No,
so
we're gonna
Mr.
hold them to the
LaFata,
end.
Ms. Rosalind is
We're
available.
gonna hold them to the end.
All to the end,
Let's
okay.
get all your testimony out of the way.
All right, and then you covered everything you wanted to cover, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our last witness, Mr. Chairman, is Matthew Flynn, who is our licensed professional planner. I'd ask that Mr. Flynn be called and sworn so that he can give testimony.
Good evening. Do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address for the record, please.
Matthew Flynn, Flynn. Business address is 101 Gibraltar Drive, Morris Plains, New Jersey.
Mr. Flynn, if you would relate to the board by whom you were employed and in what capacity?
Sure. I'm the project professional planner, and I work for John McDonough Associates.
All right, and what are your credentials as a, well, first I should ask, have you ever been accepted by this board as a professional planner?
No, I haven't been accepted before this.
So we'd like the benefit of your credentials.
Sure. I have my professional planner's license in the state of New Jersey, as well as my national certification for planners, and my education comes from Rutgers, where I got my master's degree in planning and public policy.
And you've appeared before various planning and zoning boards in the state?
I have.
Okay. Want to mention a few?
Yeah, just in Middlesex County, just to name a couple, East Brunswick, Sayreville, New Brunswick.
South Plainfield.
With you, right?
Right.
Correct, yeah.
All right, counsel, we'll accept his credentials.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Flynn, there's two new bulk variances that are being requested: lot coverage and improving parking. We're actually improving the prior parking variance. There is a concept in planning called a C2 justification, where you're trying to make a good project even better. Is that the appropriate justification?
Yes.
All right, would you tell us why?
Sure. So as council mentioned, we're going to run these two variances through the C2 test, whereby the benefits of the application as a whole outweigh any detriments. We just heard about the variances, so I won't go too much into them. I'll just summarize. We are requesting a variance for number of parking spaces, 556 being proposed, whereas 1,747 are required. Again, this is actually an improvement. We're adding 35 spaces from the previously approved 521 spaces. And then there's another variance for lot coverage, 61.7% proposed, whereas 35% is permitted, which is a slight uptick from the 59.8% that was previously approved. So just for the board's clarification, that's an uptick of about 1.9%, or just over 1 acre of an increase in coverage on a 68-acre property, which is de minimis. I think that I'll add that we are in the R30 zone, which is the township's residential zone. In the LI, light industrial district, the lot coverage allowance is actually 60%. So we are right around that standard, which actually makes sense because we're not proposing a residential use. So a strict application of that requirement is inappropriate for the land use being proposed. So the C2 balancing test, the benefits of improved circulation and improved parking, safety, and efficiency outweigh any detriments. Just to go through the negative criteria, in terms of the parking variance, I think that that's self-explanatory. We're bringing that closer to conformance. The slight uptick in lot coverage allows the site to accommodate better in terms of circulation, safety, efficiency, and it's only an uptick of about 1.9%. So de minimis in nature. As our engineer testified, no additional noise, traffic, or visual impacts. A noise study was even conducted and was satisfactory, and the noise being proposed is still compliant. And just to kind of backtrack a little bit, this was a use variance application in the very beginning. That D1 use variance was approved, and all of those justifications for the use variance have not been changed. The site is still a particularly suitable location. This comes from the Medici test for use variances. The planner at the hearing when that use variance was approved, put on those proofs on the record about access to the turnpike, similar uses nearby, how the site isn't suitable for residential development. He put on the proofs for the negative criteria for that use variance in terms of buffering, and all of that is still applies. So with that, all of the benefits of the application, I would say substantially outweigh any detriments, which are, there are no detriments of a substantially adverse nature.
You might make an argument that, I don't know if you'd make the argument, but since what we are merely doing is doing this ring road, there's no new use variance required, or do you think it would be safe to request it under any circumstances?
I don't think that it's necessary, no.
All right. With that being said, if there is a need, we hope you would provide it. Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I guess with that, if the board did determine that a use variance was required, like I said, all of those proofs are on the record and they still apply. So I think we're safe either way.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our 3 witnesses. They are all available to the board or your professionals for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mika, we're going to start with you again, please.
Thank you, Chairman.
Stay there.
I have just quick questions from the engineer.
Okay, then we're going to bring the engineer. I thought you were going to ask for the planner.
Make sure you speak into the mic so everyone
Okay.
can hear, please. Thank you.
All right. To clarify, the A1 is the proposed, right? And A2 is the what's been approved.
It's flipped. A1 on the left there is what's.
I see the ring road on the A1. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. I forgot that.
So
which
just
is
wanted
which?
to, yeah.
Make it clear for the record, which is
that's
which.
Thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
Yes, that's flipped. A1 is the proposed with the ring road, and A2 is flipped. The approved warehouse.
Thank you.
Thanks. In terms of, I think the testimony has already been provided in terms of overall lighting, the circulation pattern, everything is not changing except for addition of that ring road, which would, is it your understanding that would mostly be used by tractor trailers for circulation? Or the?
Mostly tractor trailers, but again, if there was a 2-tenant scenario, cars would also be using that to access that new parking pod on the southeast.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the sound wall, and you did talk a little bit about it, could you clarify the location of the sound wall, what was approved, is still remaining the same, is that correct? And the length of it is, for the most part, the same, and it's along the southern portion and the southeast portion of the site, is that correct?
Correct. So just to provide a little bit of additional information, we worked very closely with New Jersey Natural Gas. And if you look at Exhibit A2, there's a big green swath of land right there that New Jersey Natural Gas basically dictated we couldn't really put any kind of roadway or trees on top of. So we had to squeeze this ring road between the existing, approved tractor trailer locations and that easement. So the sound wall in that location did shift a little bit south, but it's still in the same general location on the southern portion of the site. And then we did, I would say, minor adjustments to the southeast portion. But again, there's sufficient overlap between the two walls. There's a gap in the sound wall due to the New Jersey Natural Gas easement that was not allowed to have a wall in it. This is consistent with the prior approval. We did have a gap. It wasn't a continuous sound wall, but the design was closely engineered to make sure that it still met local and state standards.
Thank you. In terms of the buffering along the property line, which is beyond the easement, that's still remaining the same as it was approved. Is that correct?
Are you specifically referring to the conservation easement that was on the eastern portion of the site?
No, I'm talking about the southern portion, the property line. Right next to that is landscaping beyond the...
Correct. On the other side...
That's still remaining the same as it was approved. Is that correct? Thank you. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mark, you're up.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Before I get to my report, the sound wall. Your plans mention that you're tying into an existing 15-foot sound wall that was approved. You don't have an approval for a 15-foot wall that's shown on the plan. So can you elaborate on that as to what we're doing with that wall?
So the prior approval in place included basically a wall height that was 15 feet above the pavement grades. So that was a combination of wall as well as berms plus like a shorter wall. So.
Correct, but it wasn't a 15-foot high wall that was approved by this board.
Correct. We worked with, I believe it was, Dan Miola from Langen worked with your office to kind of modify that and work through that. But it was a modification after.
I just want to be clear for the record. There's no approved 15-foot high wall along that southern property line, and your plan shows it as approved. So, I just want to get beyond that. And it's partly constructed. So the materials on that wall that in your building, has that been, do you have an approval from your acoustical engineer as to the materials that have been installed?
Correct. It had to have a specific density to kind of meet that acoustical study that was done, so that's been approved.
Okay. I'd like to get a copy of that provided to the board as part of this approval.
We can do that.
Well, so since we're on the wall, let's talk about the gap. Your testimony was that it is essentially the same as what was previously approved. Can you show us on those plans the opening on the existing approval and the opening that's proposed? Because it appears that the opening proposed is about 140 foot wider of a gap.
Sure. I'm going to go over and point. That's okay?
Yeah, can you grab that wireless, please, and make sure you talk close to it and loud and clear? Thank you.
Hold it until the light turns on.
I think the green light's on. Is that?
Just tap on it. Let's just verify. A little bit hard.
Better?
There we go.
So we'll start with the existing approval that we have in place. So the sound wall basically came along the southern portion of the building and the parking. It jogged up and around the 30 spaces. And then it had a gap, again, for that same New Jersey Natural Gas easement. And it picked up on the south side of that car parking spot and bent up and around and then extended east towards that conservation easement And as part of the original approval, we actually extended that a little bit further per Mark Rensup's comment as part of, I believe it was the preliminary approval. And then let me, sorry, I'm cutting off some of the board members over here. But on the proposed plan, we have a similar wall on the entire length of the southern road here. And then we have that similar gap for the New Jersey Natural Gas easement. And then we also have a wall that is located on the opposite side of that, extending all the way up in the same location that was previously approved.
So what's missing is what you said on the approved plan is where the wall jogged up towards the building and then back out. That's what's missing. That was a vital part of that approval with this board and, you know, the discussions on the sound wall at this board. And you worked with my office and the Mark Remsa at that time. And that was quite important. So how do we achieve that closing of that gap similar to what we had on the original approval?
So again, this was run through our acoustical engineer to confirm more or less the same level of acoustical and noise mitigation would be between the approved and the proposed plan. And the gap is, you know, from here, it's about 140 feet as well. But if you come over to the approved plan, you also kind of have a similar gap as well. It's just a little bit more staggered because the configuration allowed for it. The new road with the access around it doesn't quite allow for that same staggering. But again, it was engineered to basically comply with the local noise and state codes.
Right, and another difference to that is now you're bringing tractor trailers into that gap area. So I do have concerns with that and the noise levels there. I don't know that your noise engineer is here to speak about that, but that is a concern. And but if your representation is that that there's no change in the noise pattern, and that's what it is at this point.
Yeah, and again, we worked closely with them to design this so that, you know, we could work with the local noise and codes, and we did provide a memo as part of the application for this that went into a little bit more detail.
With regard to the top of the wall, you have the elevation of the top of the wall of what was approved and what is proposed at this point on the south side?
So generally, again, it's 15 feet above the pavement. We can certainly elaborate that on the plans as part of like a compliance submission to kind of make sure that the elevations are, you know, at least a minimum of what was approved previously, but that's, that was the intent as part of this application, to maintain that minimum elevation.
Yes, if you can provide that, please. Let's talk buffering. Is there any buffering that's being provided adjacent to the wall? As before the approval, you had a landscape buffer on a berm, 10 foot high with a small wall on top of it. Now I believe you're eliminating the entire buffer. Is that true, other than the wall?
Correct. Great question. So this is something we worked closely with New Jersey Natural Gas on. And like I explained before, we really had to squeeze this wall in, or the road rather, in between that easement and the trailer parking spaces, which got very, very tight. So we did request from New Jersey Natural Gas whether or not they would allow us to plant trees on there, given that this is a 70-foot wide easement and the mains are centered, and we were told that we were not allowed to do that. So there's really not as much buffering as there was before, and that's kind of a nature of the constraints between the approved development and the New Jersey Natural Gas easement.
Okay, well, I'd like to see some buffering, whatever we can get in there to, because now we're staring at a 15-foot high wall. If we can make it more aesthetically pleasing by getting some landscaping, so the view from the residents are not looking at a tall wall.
We can certainly work with you on resolution compliance, maybe put some smaller like evergreen trees or something to kind of make that impact a little less.
So now my review letter is dated July 21, 2022. Elaborate on a couple more comments. The circulation road, I think it was said about having two tenants, multiple tenants. Will they have restricted access within the complex? Because right now you have two gates proposed right where the road splits, but there's no other gates provided. So if you're looking at multiple tenants, wouldn't you be providing additional gates to keep each tenant in their leased area? And if you are, that should be on the plan at this point.
Yeah, so great question again. It really depends on the multi-tenancy aspect. There are certain projects where you have two tenants and they don't have a secure truck port, it's shared. And there are scenarios where they do have that. And I think we'd have to work with, the two tenant scenario if that came in, if they needed additional security. But the way we have it shown right now is something that, the applicant as well as us as the engineer feel is something that is feasible to move forward with.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, that is all I have at this point. The applicant agreeable to all the comments in my review letter?
We are.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna open up questions to the board. Mr. Lupo?
I have a question for the engineer. To add on to Mark's question, that last question he asked you, how are you proposing to splitting this building up with two? Are you going on each side, or are you splitting the building down the middle? Which would lead to what Mark was saying as far as security purposes is negate. Because if you don't know how you're gonna split the building, where are you gonna put a gate?
So the building will be split going with a vertical line down the middle. So it would be split the two, the way you described it initially. And again, a lot of times with the secure truck court, it's a little bit difficult to manage with like a security gate in the middle because it loses a lot of dock space because you need a lot of room to maneuver these tractor trailers. So if you put a fence right down the middle, it makes it very difficult to maneuver into those spaces right against the fence. So it kind of depends, like I said before, on what the multi-tenant situation is. If some tenants are gonna be okay with sharing a truck court, which is the case in a lot of applications, and then there's other ones where they do require additional fencing to kind of secure that, but it would result in an application with less loading docks. So we wanted to come in with kind of the loading docks that are the maximum number here, and if we do need to put a fence up, it would more or less just be like a gate that could be manned. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Sure. Mr. Tanzi?
Yeah, I'm reading the reports here, and I have a concern with the RTP, Environmental Association report, on the air quality. I don't know when. I see the original was taken back in 2019. Well, this past 2 weeks with the crazy weathers we had and the heat, okay, almost every day there were air quality alerts issued. And I'm reading the report here, and it's saying that there will be no air quality impacts from the proposed development that will exceed the NAAQS surrounding projects. So I'm a little confused because we did have air quality alerts this past couple of weeks. And this report that's dated April 1st, 2022, shows that there's no air quality adverse impact qualities. And almost every day we had air quality alerts. So I'm a little confused on that.
So I'll try my best. The National Ambient Air Quality Standards, which is the NAA that's being referred to in the reports, are federal EPA standards, and they are a function of I think there's 6 different pollutants: NOx, SOx, nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, and 4 others that we can talk about. Those standards are for the entire United States of America. All right, and they, in various parts of America, on any given day, you can have some part of the country exceed them. All right, so and it usually becomes a function of how much sunlight there is and where the air came from. So, for example, the East Coast gets beaten up by Illinois, Indiana, Michigan. The air pollution and air goes west to east. So I think what the expert may be saying there is that as a result of the operation here, you're not going to see ambient air quality standards exceeded in Monroe Township or South Brunswick Township. You know, when you, and I think everybody knows here, cars, except for the prior national administration, cars had very strong air quality standards, what the emissions could be from the cars. They had the same thing from trucks. Then in the prior administration, they were knocked out. And now in the new administration, they're put back in. But what it's telling you is this is not a function of BizRep in Monroe. It's a function of the country as a whole. And they're saying that I think they're saying, and I'm not, I'm taking a few air pollution courses, but I'm not speaking as an expert. But what I'm saying is that I think the report is saying that what you have in Monroe here is not going to increase your exceedance of national ambient air quality standards. They're talking about the country as a whole.
And that's what the report does say, but there were air quality alerts issued.
Right, but you're talking about for the state of New Jersey, the DEP.
I'm talking in the local areas around here.
Could I, Mr. Tanzi, who were they issued by?
Just heard it on the radio.
Yeah. My belief is that it's probably going to be a health department, a county health department, or maybe the State Department of Environmental Protection, and they're talking about generally a region of the state or the state of New Jersey, and it's usually due to the length of daylight, how much sunlight is in the air, and what kind of pollutants have blown from the middle of the country to us. New Jersey at one point was suing the states to the west to try and stop them from their emissions. But it's complicated, obviously.
Well, that's the concern I have, the difference. Thank you.
Any other questions from any board members? Carol?
How many other businesses or tenants could go into that building? I mean,
I think that might be a Dean Conrad question.
Please use the microphone.
We would expect no more than 2.
no more than 2? Because
No more than
I
2.
heard 2 or 3,
No more than 2.
because.
Two from the existing or 2 in total?
2 in total. We have,
So there's one potential additional tenant.
yeah, the building is designed so that it could have 2 tenants. If you look and you drove around the building, you'll see there's one location for an office, and then in the other corner, there's another place for an office.
You said the building was designed for 2 tenants?
It has, that's correct.
And how come, I'll get to my questions when we get to you. Yeah, finish.
That was all I had. I wanted to know how many tenants you're expecting to put in this warehouse.
And I think the answer is 2, and you had a lawyer with the runny mouth saying 2 or 3. And
You were the one?
Yeah, I was the one. So I gratuitously made a mistake. Sorry. The answer from the company is 2 tenants, max.
Any other questions? Okay, being that it was mentioned, can I have that gentleman come forward, please? The manager of the property?
Mr. Dean Conrad?
Yes, Mr. Conrad, sorry. Mr. Conrad, just a few minutes ago, you were still on the oath, and you just said that the building was designed for 2 tenants. But yet, when you came before us the first time, it was for 1 tenant. So how was the building designed?
Well, I can tell you that if you look at the building, there's two potential office entrances.
Okay, were you here initially when this?
No, I was not.
Okay, so you do know that you just said the building was designed for 2 tenants, but when the applicant came before us, it was for 1 tenant. Am I correct with that?
I think.
Yeah, I can clarify that.
Sure,
as well.
come forward.
So the original approval, this was again before Mr. Conrad was involved with the project, so I have a benefit of a little history here. But the original approval had a main office pod in the northwest portion of the building.
In the corner.
Yes, and then they also had a very small portion of office in the southeast corner that was more meant for like warehouse operations, and like, again, that's why we had like only a couple of parking spaces over there. It wasn't really meant as a primary office, but the building is very long, So we didn't want people walking from one side to the other as part of that original design. So the original design was more laid out to suit a single tenant. And as this part of this application, we're trying to make it a little bit more marketable. Correct me if I'm speaking incorrectly, Dean, but to include additional car parking on that portion so that it could potentially serve a second tenant.
Okay, so being you're standing there and you're the engineer, so you said you've been on this case from the beginning, you've been behind the scenes, am I correct with that?
I have been involved for a couple of years, yes.
Okay, if you're presenting your testimony tonight and you're telling us that this is a wonderful idea with a circular going around, how come that wasn't part of your initial plans when the building was designed?
So at that, you want to
I could try that. The problem is the crystal ball. It's very hard to predict the future. You know, we've been looking for one tenant for a while, probably at least a year and a half. We haven't gotten one. So ultimately, the market dictates what you do. Right? Monroe, we don't want empty buildings. Monroe Township doesn't want empty buildings. So we think that having the flexibility of having two tenants will make the building more marketable, more rentable, etc. And that's why you have a ring road proposed tonight.
I can also add to that as well that at the time of the preliminary application, it was a different ownership team. So they felt a little differently that this was very strongly a single tenant building. And once Brookfield came on board, you know, felt strongly that they wanted to have that flexibility for multi-tenant.
Okay, with respect to the buffering, how do you plan on mitigating or replenishing what's being removed by this 15-foot wall that's been erected?
You mean in
If we can't use NJ Natural Gas's property because they declined you already, how do we ensure that our residents, as the engineer indicated, are not going to look at a wall? I think this board worked extremely hard last time when this application came before us, and we went out of our way to ensure that everything was covered where they wouldn't be unsightly. It was also testified that the building was suited for what they were going to do for, and now all of a sudden everything seems to be changing before our eyes. I'm a little confused as to what triggered all of this. I know the market dictates the rental, but at the time you came in, the rental was fine, so that's what we agreed to. Now you want to alter it, but it's also going to impact other things that we fought hard to maintain. So how do we rectify that?
So again, as part of compliance, should we be grateful enough to get approved, we will work to kind of add what we can in front of that wall to, you know, reduce the visual impact. Likely it won't be able to be shade trees due to the natural gas easement, but we could do some kind of potential evergreen screening to enhance that a little bit. And then again, I think part of the reason, again, Dean, I don't know if you want to jump in, but there was a change of ownership. And, you know, I work with a lot of different industrial developers, and I will say each developer has a little bit of a different preference onto how they want to construct these buildings and market them. So I think if I had to guess, that would be the reason for the switch to kind of this multi-tenant flexibility.
Okay,
I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Any other board members? Seeing there's none, I'm going to open it to the public. I'm assuming there's many people in the public that would like to speak. We like to keep it to a minimum. We like to not hear redundancy, otherwise we will need to stop you. If someone brings something up and they stole your thunder, I understand that, and it's a hard thing to swallow, but we do want to get through this. I want everyone to keep in mind that this has been approved already. So if you're going to bring something up, let's talk about the amendment that they want to work on, not what was there already, because that's already done. They could walk out here tonight and continue doing what they're doing, okay? So we're willing to listen to everyone, obviously. So I know you've been sitting at the edge of the seat. Jump on up, and we're going to go through the process.
Sir, if you could just state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address for the record, please.
My name is Dennis Dressel, D-R-E-S-S-E-L. I live at 29 Woodcrest Circle, Monroe Township, New Jersey. I think a key phrase that we could gather tonight from Mr. Smith is it's very hard to plan for the future. And some of my neighbors are going to be much more technical than I am. It's nice to see a lot of new faces on the board, and I appreciate you indulging me tonight. And if I may, I'd like to approach the displays so that we could create a little bit of perspective. I think I'm able to do that. Can everybody hear me? I'll be brief. There are some pieces of this that I fail to understand, but for the life of me, I'm pleased that they're here asking for something, because the elephant has already escaped the zoo and we want to stop it from causing damage. This little speck right here, that's my house. Lived here for 26 years in August. This is done, as you just mentioned. It's all approved. They want to make some adjustments to it. I couldn't be more happy to hear that. I also think that at this particular point, compromise is something we should not lose focus on. And I appreciate everything that they're asking for. I do believe I understand that this office here was meant for staff, so they didn't have to walk half a mile to get to the other end. Part it down the center, you've got the possibility to have your 2 tenants. Are trucks allowed to drive all the way around? I'm going to talk about the one truck that manages the facility. I'm talking about truck driver pulls in 18 wheels and decides, well, I'm just going to keep going around. Because I think anybody who lives near Jamesburg happens to know that truck drivers have a tendency not to follow the rules. We've got a bridge that just proves that every other day. My largest concern, beyond the fact that we've approved this, is that if the past were prologue, everything changes. And the traffic has already changed on Cranberry Road. There's no traffic even coming from this building yet, other than the construction workers. We've had 2 years now, last summer and this summer, where we've been very patient, but the noise, the pollution, the disruption, you wanted to just chill out in your backyard, can't do it. Our pets have post-traumatic stress disorder just from the banging from the back of the truck. However, living here, if somebody could take a moment, it's probably Mrs. Roslin, what is this black line? Does that represent the ownership of the property line, or this line here? Or does this represent, I don't know. Could somebody answer that for me in the moment?
You could look and then come back and make your statement so you're on the camera. I'll let him come back.
So that is the property line extent over there. And then there is you can see that's not really part of the rendering because there's a conservation easement buffer that we are maintaining there. So we're not touching that except for some utility extensions which have been approved as part of the prior application.
So I'm going to work with what Ms. Roslin just told us. What you do not see in this particular photo is, if you go through here, there's the county road that goes all the way back to here. We've removed so many trees from right here to create an access way. They're doing construction, they're working hard, but they've taken down 40, 50, 60-foot trees, hundreds of them, just in this one section where I can see this entire warehouse from my backyard, even today, with all the foliage. I don't know how many board members have actually visited this site, and I'm pretty sure you probably don't want to raise your hands if you haven't been there. It's a very difficult situation. There is a fair amount of pollution. The weather, as it's been, creates situations. I would prefer not to be looked at the bottom of any particular scale. These are the minimum requirements for sound. These are the minimum requirements for air pollution. You know, I look around this room and I see all these historic photos where Monroe has a heritage and pride on taking care of their families, their constituents. And historically, we always have. This warehouse, I could hit it with a golf ball and a 3-iron. So the fact that they're here asking for something doesn't mean that we shouldn't approve it. We should ask for something in return. And I think what we do need to ask for starters, is not just a wall. I don't know the exact elevations, but this building is very high. From my backyard, I can see the blue stripe going around the top. And 2 years ago,
This was beautiful, pristine woods. If you look carefully here, this was all woods. They took down so many trees. It actually hurt me as a human being to go back and see what was done. So as a board, instead of saying, have a 1 million square foot warehouse, we approved 1,283 square feet. Somebody have to do the math to figure out how many 3,000 square foot can fit in there. But this, to me, is an affront to everything Monroe's ever stood for. Can be fixed. I think it can be fixed pretty easily. We should insist, if we're willing to compromise on one side, that they build a 15-foot berm and then put a wall on top with trees in front of it. We need some type of protection for our best interests, for our family's comfort, for our noise, something that might deter some of that pollution from coming our way. We would need to have some type of concession or recognition or understanding that trucks do not go around the whole area. You know, they come in here, go over there, or they come in here instead of here. I got no problem with additional cars, but you can't say there's more parking spots for more cars and it's not going to have any impact on traffic. That doesn't meet common sense standards. So those are my thoughts on the topic. I'm not going to drag on about the air and the noise and everything else. One of my neighbors is going to be extremely explicit on that. But I do believe it's our responsibility as citizens of Monroe Township, if we're going to be asked for something, that we ask for something that benefits us in return. So at the end of the day, you would simply categorize it as a little bit of sauce for the goose. And perhaps some recognition to your neighbors who have been here for 45, 50 years, such as myself, to our neighbors who have served the community with putting their lives on the line every day. We are citizens of Monroe, and we are your neighbors, even if you're on the other side of the township. So I do appreciate your time. And
Thank you.
Hope we make the best decision.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir. If you could just state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address for the record.
John Strick, 10 Woodcrest Circle, Monroe Township. Strych.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. So one of my main concerns here is with the wall. Somehow the wall that's there isn't what I think was sold to us in the beginning. I don't know if anybody's been out there. The wall looks like it came from Home Depot. It's not, you know, we were kind of told or led to believe we were going to see some kind of sound barrier like on a turnpike, something of substantialness. There's a wooden wall out there. I don't know if that meets the criteria. They say it does. To me, it doesn't look like it does. Secondly, my biggest concern here is Kings Row. They are sure watching this application. I know the board has said no to them twice before, but let's remember that they
Can you take the mic with you, please, Mr. Strick?
These properties right here, the Christmas Tree Farm and these areas, and as well as other properties that they are looking to gather, well, our new little road gives them a nice little access because their biggest, if I remember correctly, the board basically denied them because they had no access to Cranberry Road. So the question comes to my mind is, does this new roadway now allow Kings Row to tap into this new roadway? From what we just found out, this has already been sold once or twice since it's been approved. So buyer number 3 may be Kings Row. And they're going to come in here and buy the whole thing. How do we not know? We don't know what's coming. So I think what we have to do is look at what we have today. And then also, as Dennis said, you know, we have to worry about the future. What's coming down the pike here? That's my major concern. The second thing is I believe these water basins is much smaller in the new proposed roadway. I'm sure the people of Helmetta would not be happy with that. Because we all know the water is going to go straight to Helmetta. Just another point I would like to point out to the board. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. If you could just state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address again.
Elizabeth Fagan, Fagan, 21 Woodcrest Circle, Monroe Township.
Thank
And
you.
I just want to let you know that I do appreciate everyone's time here, but as far as being redundant, you know, that comment should go towards everyone, not just the citizens. It should go towards everyone. Mr. Smith here mentioned that they were extending the car lots 3 times. Their engineer mentioned it twice, and Mr. Finn and mentioned it twice too. So why is it okay for them to be redundant, and then yet you want to call out the citizens and say, oh, we don't need to hear stuff twice? Because we don't appreciate that.
I think you misinterpreted how it was. Number one, they're giving testimony. Testimony can lead to a yes or a no, so everything must be heard, and you're hearing it from different people because they're registered as professionals. As regular people, such as yourself and myself, my neighbor and myself, if we say the same thing, that is redundant. What they're saying is legal testimony on the record. I don't know if I'm speaking out of bounds. I would
No, and
prefer
I think
to-
also what the chairman was saying was that at some point, redundant testimony may be excluded. I don't know that he was necessarily saying that when the second person comes up and says the same thing, you're being shut down, and frankly, at this point, no one's been shut down. History has taught us as board professionals and board members that in applications of some concern to the public, you'll get 25 to 30 people who all want to come up and say the same thing over and over
understand.
in an attempt to kind of filibuster an application.
I-
And that's what the admonition, I believe, was.
But what also happens is you have the other party talking for quite some time, wearing everyone down to the point where when the citizens actually get to speak, it's already in the evening and everyone's tired and wants to go home. So I'm just saying, I've seen this before, and you know, you have to think of us too. We're the ones who voted the people in who seat you here. You know, we're your citizens. I have a question. This isn't pertaining to the project. It's pertaining to Mr. Smith. I just wanted to ask, are you an active senator right now?
I am, but it's not really part of the application.
Wouldn't that be conflicting? Wouldn't he have, he is a senator in New Jersey right now, and he has available to who owns the other part of this, and he has information that we don't have, and that we don't even know how to get to. And I feel this is a conflict.
I'm going to defer that to the attorney.
Ma'am, I understand what you're saying, but unfortunately, that it is not a conflict. Mr. Smith is capable of holding a position as a state senator and also representing an applicant before this board.
Well, I disagree. Okay, so as I said, they did mention how they were giving us all those extra, like 5 spots for those employees, but nobody mentioned the lights that are now going to be blaring into our neighborhood. I mean, you know, now that there's a roadway, there's going to be lights there. That was mentioned, but it wasn't mentioned they'd be blaring into our neighborhood. The sound of tractor trailers going up and down that road was not mentioned. I mean, again, like I said before, just because they ask doesn't mean you have to say yes. We sat here last time to endless hours of the night listening to Mr. Smith, Senator Smith, tell us how this isn't going to affect us because there's not even a roadway in the back. And then, wow, after the building's already built and they can't shorten the building, well, gosh darn, now they need a roadway. I mean, come on. It's ridiculous. I mean, we got to stand up to these people and just say no. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public?
Good evening, sir. If you could just state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address, please, for the record.
Sure. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Les, L-E-S, Barta, B-A-R-T-A, 223 Road Hall Road, Monroe Township. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate that we are here in person after a pandemic and living through Zoom, and I'll try to keep this as brief as I can with the notes that I have. This project was originally approved with very little public input. Can I ask the attorney why that was?
The only way I can, I think, satisfactorily answer the question is to tell you that the municipal land use law requires that certified letters be sent to all property owners within 200 feet, notifying them of the hearing and what's being sought. In addition to that, as part of the municipal land use law, we're also required to publish a notice in the newspaper of record that we're about to be before the board. Both of those things have to be more than 10 days before the hearing.
Correct. And so I just wanted to make sure that was on the record because those are minimums. That's minimum, right? Those are who you reach out to and make notice to. It doesn't mean you can't send it to people within 400 feet or within 600 feet of that property. When this original project came up, it was basically located in the middle of nowhere with the majority of the property owned by Middlesex County or by other REITs or other private investors and other areas that were deeded as green acres space. So there was really no one living, aside maybe from one or two individuals, that were within that bound. So if you have a property that was, last time I checked, it was somewhere around $73 million involved with this, you think maybe you could reach out to the neighborhood a little bit more and spend a few extra dollars to reach out to those folks, but I'll come back to that. This area was originally deeded or zoned as R30. Actually, it was R60 prior to that with an overlay because there was no sewer. Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct? It's R30, but it was R60 use because there was no sewer there originally.
The zone is R30.
Right. And so with that being said, the board has heard this many times and gone back and forth, and I want to emphasize this point, that the board makes variances and makes adjustments and relief from zoning laws in the interest of the community. We have had experiences now with this project that we could see there's going to be an impact on this neighborhood. And my concern is there's a pattern. There's a pattern with each one of these that the residents that are impacted aren't heard about it. So I'll leave that aside for the moment. In the R30, according to Dean's testimony before under the C2 balancing test, we are now basically overstepping from 60% to 61.7% on impervious lot coverage, which basically also gives us another 1.6 acres of runoff that needs to be contended with. So I'm assuming that our engineers have made sure, and I'm not being adversarial, I want to make sure that the runoff is accounted for, because in the last summer, I travel on Cranberry South Road. We are literally seeing water coming out onto Cranberry South Road through the silt fencing before there was even an inch of pavement laid. All right, and those basins were there. And I know this because I was literally driving down Cranberry South Road and had to drive across the double yellow because there was so much water on the roadway. So that's creating a safety hazard. Now I understand there's roadway improvements coming too, but that is definitely a concern that these basins are not being engineered and not able to handle the 100-year storm surge, which they claim they are, but we've seen what's happened downstream effects to Helmetta, to Jamesburg, and our other neighbors. Looking across our master plan, it was reviewed by Mr. Remsa in 2020. I found a couple things that were interesting, particular to this. Item number one, which was sustained and held to be valid in the master plan review, basically said that we should preserve and protect existing viable residential by promoting infill. Now, this project was already approved, but again, going back to my earlier statement, that as projects come up on the board, and whether it's Kings Row or another area that is affected by this, why aren't we maybe asking what's the best use for this property? Since this is approved, we can't change that, but potentially the impact to the residential neighborhood that's around there, and not to mention the 600 some odd homes in the venue across the street are being put there now. To Mr. Strick's point, that wall has been erected made of wood. Who's maintaining that? Is that a part of a covenant for this approval? Will they maintain it and in perpetuity while they're in that property? Or what happens when it starts to disintegrate? I don't see any restrictions on that or requirements on that. I mean, I understand there's code enforcement, but what happens as things change? Things rot, things disappear. Item number 2, planned residential development and open space itself, again, was another sustained item in our master plan. I don't see any use or real sort of municipal improvement to open space to almost 1,300 acres that this property abuts to. We were told previously in other engineering designs and proposals before us as residents that they're going to make it better for this part of town. We have the James River Park area that is basically landlocked. We're now putting warehouses around it, and we are not offering a conservation access or some sort of easement to it. Now we're putting a secure truck courtyard around it with fencing. That's not open to the township. It's not open to the residents. We have no access to that. You're not really helping that area. So I do want to implore that when we say we're improving things, for who? That brings me to my next point. Brookfield Properties is BRESREP 3 is about a $19 billion fund, correct me if I'm wrong, with about $2 billion in profit last year. I don't think there's a huge amount of cost involved with improving a berm or figuring out plantings or potentially electrifying the court, the secured truck court, to make sure that we're not listening to engines idling in that courtyard or having APUs or auxiliary power units on those trucks running 24 hours a day, and making sure that the truck drivers have the amenities to go inside to use bathrooms and not leave, pardon my term, piss bottles, Gatorade bottles with urine in the parking lot. Because if you don't believe that's happening, go down Cranberry South River Road, stop in the Wawa, see what's in the parking lot across the street. If you don't believe me, go just about maybe 100 yards to the left of Wawa, and they just fenced in another courtyard for secured truck parking, and those trucks are idling almost 24 hours a day. And that's not if they're actually parked on Dean's, blocking up traffic in the middle of Dean's because they can't get into, you guessed it, the secured court parking. Because the security gate can't handle the flow, the inflow into the actual yard. So that means there's a traffic impact to our area, especially 522 and Cranberry South River Road. Those trucks are literally idling 24 hours a day. I can hear it from my house. The noise study that was referred to, how come it wasn't available for review, and why are the documents not on the website for the public to review?
Mr. Barr, when you ask your questions, please ask them to this board.
I'll ask the
Not
board.
gonna be a
I'll ask the
personal
board.
Conversation.
Sure.
We'll direct them from that point. As a public portion, we're here to hear your complaints, your views, your opinions. It's not to be a debate session with council, because that's not what we're here for.
It's not. I'm asking the board, why were those acoustical studies not posted to the website for our review? And why are they not present here today? There's nothing on the website about it.
I don't know what materials are available on the website. All the materials under municipal land use law are required to be available in the planning office. So that's where the materials are provided to. Okay. That's where the materials are available. And the traffic study should have been one of those documents available along with the plans and the rest of the materials submitted by the applicant.
Okay, so my question is actually on the acoustic study itself, because as history precedes itself, previous applicants have come before us, shown us acoustic studies, and conveniently left out the truck travel paths on those specific drawings. So my concern, which goes back to now this proposed lot here, as they continue to add, I'm going to go mobile here for a sec.
I think it was already on.
As this outer ring road is added here, one of the questions that initially came up was, where do the trucks come in? What address are you giving them? So if it's Cranberry South River Road, the thought initially was that they come in the northern entrance. They would come to the loading docks, as I understood last time. They come to the loading docks, the trailers are unloaded, and a toter truck, not a full truck, not an over-the-road truck, but a toter truck would then move those empty trailers around, which is minimal amount of noise, and move them around and then set them up for loading on the other side. So it was an in and an out process. Now you're telling me there's two businesses. These truck drivers are coming in. How are they negotiating where they're going and what's in, what's out, and where are they going? Because when they come in, now they have to come in one side and go, oh, I went to the wrong business. Hold on, let me go to this side. Hold on, I got to get my truck and take it around again. And now you're basically defeating the purpose of this limited access roadway that was promised to be not a full traffic pathway. So that goes back to my noise study, which the acoustic engineer would have to address to make sure that that was appropriate there. New Jersey natural gas transmission line, that was actually moved. Correct me if I'm wrong, the board knows?
Mark, are you familiar with anything?
Well, I'll testify that yes, it was moved because I lived through the construction project of them moving that pipeline so that it could conform to fitting these things on the property.
The easement was not moved. The existing easement is unchanged as far as I'm aware, unless their engineer has any other information.
So this was, can you hear me? So this was actually before my time, but I am aware of this. So I don't know too many details, but I will tell you that the easement was moved prior to ownership by Brookfield and the prior owner who Langen was retained to work with. But I believe it was located more north on the site and then shifted south.
Correct. So my point is there was a lot of money put into moving a natural gas transmission pipeline of high pressure to be able to acquire this property and then operate what we're doing. So we're not talking about a few shekels of money here that were involved. Going back to the secured yard, if the money is there to move a natural gas pipeline, then I would ask Brookfield Properties and whoever else, if this board would please, to make sure that they accommodate for future proofing electrical vehicles, trucks that can have charging stations, things that will reduce the pollution from diesel particulate in the air. I have a direct concern about that because I am downwind of that. So every truck that idles for every minute pumps out carbon material that basically is known to be a carcinogen. I have 3 small kids. I had 4. Okay? I have a concern to make sure that we don't have a cancer-causing air pollution issue. And that's what's happening. You're putting 200 trucks in there, conservatively, between trailers and docks and everything else. The wayfinding I already addressed there. Wayfinding on a property like this is going to be a disaster. And if you don't believe it, call the board in South Brunswick and see what they're dealing with at the Everlast warehouse property literally across the road. Every day, every morning from 7 to about 9 a.m., trucks are backed up and now actually impacting traffic through the intersection at Cranberry South River and Deans. We talked about the additional runoff increase on the 1.6 acres of loss, 35 additional cars. Just to ask the board, is there really no impact when we're talking 35 cars times 3 shifts? If they're working 8-hour shifts in that location, that's 90 additional cars come to that property. That's not negligible. We talked about the amenities for truck drivers inside already and making sure that they are not contributing to that area. And also, as I mentioned to the board, any of these applications probably should also include some garbage or some policing of the property to make them aware, because there really is just trash everywhere generated from these sites. And so finally, I think our neighbors had mentioned in there, we know that there's trucks stuck in the bridge. If no one believes that, it's been 3 times this week alone. I have Facebook pictures of it. I get texts of it. I get nixles from Jamesburg Police Department. It's a real issue. And I don't appreciate previous applicants, not this property specifically, but other applicants had said, oh, it's not a problem. It's 7 trucks a year. It's about 7 trucks maybe in a week that we see come down and create traffic hazards. So any impact that this site will have will definitely have a traffic impact with it. And finally, I think this is another example of tragedy of the commons. We continue to take out of the environment. We continue to literally pave over wooded areas and put up a parking lot and then go, we get tax revenue out of it. I get it. But is it really improving what we're doing? So I would just leave that as a comment for future references on the board. And the final one I have for the board is, did this go back with this change in traffic pattern and access? Did this go back to fire subcode or for approval by the fire department? Because now you have traffic and truck traffic, there should be fire hydrants and not yard hydrants in that area. As you have vehicles moving around, that's going to also limit that access for fire suppression. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Michelle? I see it.
Nope, you don't have to be sworn in.
I don't.
If you could just state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address, please.
Michelle Arminio, ARMINIO, 9 Nathaniel Street. I have a couple questions I hope will be answered through the chair from the applicant, because I do believe this is not just a comment section time. I believe it is informative to try to get on the record what the facts are. I see in the testimony of the applicant, impervious cover variance. That's one of the items in the application tonight.
Yes.
Okay, stormwater regulation modifications. Did they modified our stormwater regulations? Could we find out to what degree? And again, sometimes the applicant's information either goes quickly or it's not really that it's difficult to understand. So how much of the current stormwater regulations were modified for this application, please?
Mark, would we have an answer to that question? Or would you?
Defer to the applicant.
Mr. Smith, do you have an answer to that question?
Ms. Roseland?
Please use the mic when everyone speaks so everyone in the room can hear. Thank you.
So the proposed circulation road will be managed by 2 of the stormwater basins on site, which are infiltration basins. And then there's also 7 manufactured treatment devices to provide water quality for the new road.
Okay, but the question is, Mr. Chair, how much of the stormwater regulations currently have been modified to accommodate this applicant?
I'm not knowledgeable.
I mean, is there,
Chairman,
there's a
I
var,
understand
okay,
what
so
you're
can you
asking.
tell me what the variance is?
Stormwater regulations are published and enforced by the state of New Jersey, Department of Environmental Protection, enforced at the local level by the town engineer, and you have to, we're subject to very strict stormwater standards. Last March 1st, new standards were adopted. You don't have the power.
Mr. Smith, can you use the table mic, because that one's
Sure.
not on.
The local government doesn't have the, I don't think you have the power to modify state regulations. They have to follow state regulations, and my understanding is we have received the necessary permits from the DEP, or am I wrong on that?
Yes, but Senator, you are the chair of the Environmental and Energy Committee in the
Absolutely
state.
irrelevant.
It is relevant. But we are asking for a variance of the stormwater modification.
Nobody's asking, is there a request for a variance from
Mr.
stormwater
Chairman,
regulations?
Variance is not for the stormwater modification.
and could you clarify?
They're meeting the stormwater requirements under the current ordinance, which is in line with the current state standards.
Okay.
So they're meeting
All
that.
right.
They're asking for a variance on impervious coverage.
Impervious coverage,
Yes.
okay. Well, that has to do with absorption of rainwater and all that kind of stuff. And we know in this area, we're experiencing more and more, and other people have spoken to a flood. And the fact that someone said 100-year flood, I mean, I think those facts no longer exist. I think every time there's a rain event, we're going to have. So impervious coverage is really an extraordinary thing that you guys, to protect our community. I mean, we have people in all over our community flooding out constantly, and every time we have an impervious coverage that is more than what the ordinance is, and people are asking for those variances, that is going to impact. So when they talk about a benefit to the community, it's not a benefit to the community. It may be a benefit to the applicant to ask for that, but in this case, it is a negative impact for the community. So I would like the board to take that into consideration. The 15-foot wall and the modification design really wasn't answered. What is the modification to the wall?
Mr. Smith, would you be able to answer that question?
Well, I'm not smart enough, but I'll get Ms. Roseland to.
Okay,
Ms.
we'll have the
Roseland, if you
engineer
would
come
like.
back up, please. You might as well just take
the
a seat
sound
here.
wall.
Why get up and down?
Do we have a chair?
I'll consider it my exercise for the day. So I tried to explain this earlier, but let me try again here, just so I make sure I answer your question. So this was the previously approved development, and we had a sound wall going from essentially this point on the warehouse all the way along the southern portion, at which point it did a jog and it broke for the New Jersey natural gas easement. And then it picked up on the other side of that parking space and went up and kind of parallel to that gas easement and where the utility extensions would be. Does that make sense?
Yes, but the question is, there was a modification to the wall. Is that, Mr. Chair, the modification?
I think she's referring to, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but you referred to the wall as a 15-foot wall, and that's not what the original intent was in the original resolution when this was passed. I think it was more of a berm with some type of wall, with some type of ground coverage. Mark, am I correct in that response?
Was that your question?
So
So
is
is that-
there
is
an
that-
ask tonight to
is-
change
is
that
that-
from the original
They can
approval?
ask whatever they want. It
Well, that's
doesn't
what
mean
I'm
it's
trying to
being approved.
understand.
Is that the question that you're getting to?
My question is,
about changing of the wall.
yes,
Okay.
what are they asking for tonight that is different from the original approval?
From what we saw tonight, what our engineer brought up and made light of, the wall that they currently are showing us is a 15-foot wall.
Wooden wall?
When it wasn't originally intended that way, it was originally a berm. Actually, I'm gonna let Mark answer this question as the engineer. I'm overstepping my bounds.
Mark, do you want me to elaborate on
Yeah,
that?
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to do the testimony for the applicant.
Okay.
Yes, I
She-
can
she
answer that one.
She did a
I
good
understand
job
the question now. I
clarifying
apologize.
before.
So I walked through the original design, and Mark is correct in identifying it. We did have a landscaping around this previously. There was a berm for a portion of that southern wall. And as part of the amendment that we're seeking tonight, we essentially shifted that wall down, and we did eliminate the berm to kind of squeeze that in between the trailer parking and the gas easement. Given the constraints we were at, that berm did go away. And I think I can speak on behalf of BizRep here. We will do something to kind of enhance that frontage with some shrubbery. But given the constraints that we're working with between the approved parking lot that was essentially under construction and the gas easement where we were told we could not encroach, we were not able to provide that for.
Thank you. I'm satisfied with that answer. My response to that is the constraints, again, are a benefit to the applicant, but the constraints are not taking into consideration the residents. I have been to many of these things over 20 years, and I have seen that the initial application, when there's a full house of residents and concerned, citizens, they get all these promises, and then periodically, as we see tonight, these things are stripped away. So now, the applicant is satisfying and benefiting themselves, and again, the residents are really constrained for quality of life. So again, this application tonight should not be approved on that level as well. I'm ready to continue. Again, the southern portion of the site is closest to the residential neighborhood, and I was here when this room was full with this board and this community and our officials telling how wonderful this is going to be. They took all these trees away, you changed the zoning, and now they're coming and again, whittling away the original approval and trying to get more benefit and more benefit to the detriment, I believe, of the overall community. After all, we are the citizens and the quality of life, and we pay the taxes, and they may pay taxes also, but this is about living in Monroe. I'm going to continue. Again, this originally started as a residential R30 land use. It was changed against, to me, the burden. And again, there was talk about no negative criteria. Well, certainly not negative criteria for the applicant, but the burden is borne by the residents. The D1, my notes may be wrong, the use variance was approved previously, but all the trees were there, and the promises, I was here when the promises were made to the residents, and they are no longer there. I also think if there's no sound barrier report that was available on the website, you said it may be in the planning board, in the planning department, but now things are on the website. So if it's going to be discussed for the applicant, it should be available to the citizens before we come. We have the technology now, all the other things are there. If that has been eliminated or not provided, and this board, has not been able to expose it to the citizens, I think that's a detriment of the applicant tonight. And the permits. It seemed like the board, and forgive me if I misunderstood, but the board and the professionals seem to be unaware of the changes, to the gas line or to the easement.
I don't think any board member is gonna know that. That's not
But our
our area
professional,
of-
Mr.
Chairman.
Rasimowitz.
No, I indicated I wasn't aware of any change to the easement. That's not part of this application. That's history. It wasn't something that's brought before this
But
board.
it
so.
impacts, sir, okay, that's your professional statement, it's on the record. My statement would be that it impacts the application tonight. And especially, how can we ask our board members to make decisions that impact our community if we are unaware, previously or not, as to how these applications are permitted? I mean, you guys are responsible for taking care of Monroe, in my opinion. Okay, so to me, the elements of tonight's application that are not on the plans, because of that, it should not be approved. It should not be approved this evening, for sure. And when and forgive me for, these are just recent notes. When the application, I said this before, gained first approval, the room was filled with concerned residents. They're probably unaware now of the changes and, again, what's happening that's taking away all the promises made originally. And I think there was a lot of concern talking about accommodation of the tenants, and I get we're in a capitalist society, but the accommodation to the tenants with no deference at all to Monroe constituents or Monroe citizens. So all the positive criteria that is beneficial to the developer and applicant, to me, there is no beneficial to the residents impacted by this application or the overall community. I think there's insufficient documentation, and I would ask this board to consider the people and the citizens of Monroe, and for this evening's application, deny it and do not approve it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else in the public? Seeing there's none, I make a motion to close the public portion.
So moved.
Ms. Katori and Carol. All in favor of closing the public portion?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, before we go to a vote, board members, I do have a question to ask, and correct me if I'm wrong. Was this site gonna be used for the turnaround for the trucks before it hits going down towards the bridge, or am I?
No, that was the other.
Okay. All right, that's why I said, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm wrong. I got it. Okay, okay, board members.
I have a question.
Yes, Carol?
So the ownership has changed several times?
Several times.
So we weren't aware of it, but how do we know that there's going to be another ownership and they're going to come before us to do
Well,
something?
I don't think there are any guarantees in this country that
No, I
ownership
understand.
won't change, and it could change.
I'm
But
concerned too about all the trees that were knocked down unnecessarily. for
well,
the
one of the residents, I think it was the first gentleman that stood up, Mr. Dressel, Dennis Dressel said, "You know what? Maybe this is something where the applicant and the board should sit down and see if there's some way to improve this, such that the neighborhood can benefit from it and we can benefit from it." And I make that offer. I mean, I'm willing to sit down with the board professionals and see if, after listening to the testimony tonight, if there are some things that would make this more attractive to the community. At the end of the day, it's not a great thing to have an empty building, although I think it will rent. But But by leaving it as it is, you're saying it's going to be one tenant only, one big tenant only, as opposed to two. And you're saying you have an opportunity to maybe make this a little more flexible, safer, rentable, whatever, which is to the benefit of the community as well. The building's there. You know, we have an approval to go forward, and what we're trying to do, as the planner said in the C2 test, we're trying to make a good project better. Now, the residents had some specific issues. Maybe there's something we can do to address those.
So I will take that as, are you willing to hold off a vote tonight to negotiate with the residents or try and work something out, or how do you wish to proceed?
Well, what I'm throwing that out there is...
That's not for us to decide. That's up to you. If you heard statements from the audience and you wish to do something, Mark, help me out.
Mr. Chairman, if, you know, I'm hearing Mr. Smith. There was a lot of items raised. I have concerns too that I raised earlier on with the wall. There's things that can be done to make it better than what we have before us, and if the applicant's willing to, you know, go back to the table and look at making revisions, whether it's landscaping, whether it's the wall, or the other items discussed, you know, that's the applicant's choice, and you know, I'm certainly willing to sit down and
well, one of my
entertain revised plans.
One of my concerns are they may sit down with the TRC and come up with something, and then the residents have to come back out again, and it may not be suitable, and then they may say, well, we met, you know, I don't know where to draw the line. Do we include people from the outside? Do we not? Do we move forward with the application tonight because they brought it to us and it's been on, you know, I don't know.
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, your first question is to the applicant to see what their desire is with respect to their application. They have the ability to look at the board this evening and say, we'd like you to make a vote based upon the application that's been presented, or alternatively, we'd like the opportunity to adjourn the application to present you with revised plans that depict some modification in order to address the concerns of both the professionals and the public. That's their call as to what they want to do, and then the question is when they come back and what modifications are made. If they'd like to go revisit the plan, there's not going to be a way to do that without having them come back, without having revised plans, and unfortunately without having the public come out again. I mean,
well, I think under any circumstance you want the public to be able to come out.
right. Well, of course. No, but
So there's no question about
the public's here,
But
and the public,
yeah.
you know, took the time to come in and voice their concerns over the application. Unfortunately, there's no way to have the revised plans come in without having to bring them out again.
Yeah, so in
it
answer
happened tonight.
to the chairman's question, we would like that opportunity to sit down with your professionals and see if some of these issues can be worked out for the benefit of everyone.
Okay, we'll get to that. I'm going to take I'm doing something off the cuff here because we know they don't open the public, and I'm not. But I'm assuming you folks would like to be notified. Is that correct?
Yes, I think it would be prudent and in the best interest of all, time and everything else.
Okay, can you use the microphone? And it's not a public session, it's just a question I'm asking to clarify so we don't come back here again and go through this again. You would like to be notified as well as everyone else. So what I'm gonna recommend is at that point, everybody notify.
What, just, Mr. Chairman, when you say notified, you mean notified of the new hearing date? Is that what we're discussing?
I'm going to assume the new hearing date, and I'm going to assume, again, I'm assuming, I'm not speaking on their behalf, what changes are made. Again, I don't want, we're not going to go through a whole session.
No whole session.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you guys are looking for.
Yeah, it seems like you're on the right page. It would be prudent if both parties got together and spoke before we sat down in a venue like this again and sucked up a lot of time from the community, your families, and our families.
So
That's
that-
up to them.
So that wouldn't include us, that would include
And then they can
council
present
and the
it.
residents in the surrounding area. Are you open to that?
And would be representatives, not en masse.
Yeah, how do you tell who not to come? But that being said, I'd be happy to do that under the supervision of the town. And the reason for that is if Mr. Razumovitz and/or the planner don't know what the residents are asking for, it makes it a little hard for us to modify plans without the input of the town as well. So, you know, we have no problem meeting with the residents and the professionals. I mean, that's in everybody's best interest.
Mr. Stroin, can you shed some light to me? Please point me in the correct direction how we should proceed with this, where everyone as a group would be able to have some say, so we could move forward and we maybe can appease the applicant, we maybe can appease the residents of the town. I'm in uncharted area right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that the suggestion made by the residents as well as confirmed by Mr. Smith is an excellent one, that a time and place be designated where some representatives from the community along with our professionals and the applicant get together and meet and go over all the things that were presented and some of the issues that they would like to see incorporated into the revised plans.
So,
Is that agreeable?
yes, but I'd like to throw a suggestion out there. Perhaps it might be a good idea to separate the parties and then bring the parties together. Maybe it'd be a good idea for the residents to talk to the professionals in town, tell them exactly what they want, and then we can hear from the professionals what it is that Monroe Township residents want. We're either going to be able to say yes or no. But the problem you have with a group of 10 or 20 people in a room is it's going to be a little chaotic. So if we can, we'd like to get the town to tell us what they want us to do on behalf of the residents. Is that possible?
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I can jump in here.
Sure.
I mean, this is all new. You're treading in new waters here.
Yes, you are.
Typically, in a situation like this, the applicant is looking to make revisions. He's heard what the residents had to say. If the applicant chooses to meet with the residents, they meet with residents. We've had applicants who've done that many times over the years. It was an applicant's meeting with residents, period.
So we're not mediators.
But we heard the residents tonight. There's quite a bit that was put out into the public, by the public, that the applicant has heard. I mean, I don't know what more needs to be said tonight for you to go back and make revisions and take all these things into account. I'd be happy to meet with anybody. I've met with residents, on this application and other applications all the time. But I can't direct the applicant what he should be putting on his plans or not.
All
It's
right.
his choice.
I
It's
think
my
that's-
review of this.
We give.
yeah.
So why don't we take we were asking for an adjournment. We'll try to revise our plans to what we think the residents wanted and what we can practically provide. And hopefully it'll work. Hopefully it'll meet most of their concerns. But I understand if the town doesn't want to be a mediator in all this. I get it.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think this is the forum,
The town is the
forum
mediator
for that. And I'll
in all
defer to our
this.
attorney, but this is the forum for that.
Well, it is the forum for that. I think the only thing that had caused me concern was Mr. Smith's request that the township meet with the residents and try to distill what their concerns were for presentation to the applicant, because I don't know that the township wants to be the arbiter of what the concerns are of the applicants. I think it's better for the applicant and the residents to either meet or for the applicant to take what comments were received this evening and try to revise the plans accordingly. Certainly, I think the township's indicated it has no problem meeting with all the parties at once, but I think the concern is that trying to do it as a two-step process where the applicant or where the residents meet with the township who then distills it for the applicant could be problematic.
If I may interject, communication is the key to success, and you can have a couple, not 20, representatives from the local neighborhood, and quite frankly, the local neighborhood is very small. We would like to speak with you, address our concerns. There may be things that cannot be accomplished by law. There may be things that cannot be accomplished by natural and man-made resources that are already in place, such as the gas line. But I haven't heard anything here tonight that can't be fixed, given we've already let this beast loose. But we can do it in such a way where it accommodates your need and our concerns and protects our neighborhood to the best we can, given the situation we find ourselves in tonight. So it would be up to you to take that invitation we'd be happy to share some names with you. And then next time we meet in this particular forum, I think it would be a much more pleasant and productive meeting.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I can also echo the residents' concern, and I know that there's been precedent that's actually been done with one of Mr. Smith's other clients, specifically the venue, where they met with residents directly and went ahead and essentially heard the residents' concerns, and I think we're able to very appropriately work out a solution that worked for all. So I would definitely be in favor of the suggestion made by this resident here and carry that forward.
Okay, so can we establish, would 4 people be adequate on your part?
That would be
I
acceptable.
would assume it would be Mr. Barter, Mr. Strick, yourself, and does that lady live in that vicinity where you guys are, or?
Well, what I would suggest is we don't need to set a roster this evening, but I would like to speak with my neighbors, and we'll come up, we'll have a minor confab and see which folks might best represent the circle, given their areas of expertise.
Well,
Do you need a roster?
I don't need a roster, but I don't want to get involved with them, but I do think the people who deserve the opportunity to sit and do the negotiating are the people who took the time to come here tonight and get up and voice their opinion. I don't think people, I'm not saying they're not entitled to anything, but that would be for the group, whoever's here, to sit with them and get feedback to go forward. But you guys took the time to come here, you took the time to voice your opinion, and you should have the right to sit with council and the town to see what you could bring forward. I don't think someone who wasn't here should have to jump the line in front of you to sit with Mr. Smith.
While I appreciate that, far be it for me to speak for my neighbors, I would certainly like to attend that meeting, and I would imagine the folks in this room would as well, so you're most likely on the right path.
Okay, so how do we go about establishing this list, or that's not for us to do?
I think at this point, Mr. Smith is in the room tonight. He has members of the community in the room. Certain that once we get what we're going to do with respect to the adjournment, they can figure out how to exchange information to.
Mr. Smith and I will share numbers, and then we'll coordinate, and then
Once
we'll
you
get
es-
together and meet
Once you
somewhere.
establish that, then you notify, Mark, would it be you? Or?
They're gonna resubmit plans?
No, I think Mr. Stroin said that, okay, it would go to you?
Yeah, I think that what happens is after the applicant and the residents meet, obviously that will, I think, generate the revised plans, and then those revised plans would go ahead and follow the normal course.
Is that amicable for everyone?
I believe that's acceptable.
Mr. Smith?
We're working, we're getting there.
It's progress.
It is progress. So a question here. Are we going to be able, sooner is better, if we're going to get something done and get plans done. Can we meet within the next 3 weeks so that we can have something to put together? Chairman, when is your next meeting? September what?
August 30th?
Oh, August 30th.
What's your next meeting after that?
September 27th.
I don't believe that there would be any problem meeting prior to that with enough time for you to make any revisions to your documents in order to present a fair and reasonable proposal to this board.
Well, what I'd like to do, if it's possible, we could be continued to the 30th, and we can report back to you on what it is that both sides have agreed to. And if the board thinks we're not doing enough, deny us. Don't put us through the ringer. Let's get this done once and for all. If we can't come to an agreement on what we're going to do to resolve their issues, there's no sense in paying lawyers and engineers and planners to just keep on going and going and going. So, and I understand on the 30th, it's strictly a continuation unless you hear peace in the valley and everybody sing Kumbaya. But if we can meet in that middle week of August or earlier, maybe we can get some things agreed upon in a resolution. And we may or may not be able to engineer it by the 30th, but at least let us come back and say, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, we can't do this, and we can't do this. And if we're not making the board and the residents happy, get it over with, deny us.
I I think that's agreeable. So August 30th is gonna be the deadline. It's either gonna be a yay or nay when you come before us. If the public is in line with you and you're agreeable and you guys come here and tell us, you know, we came to an agreement and it's established on the record what the agreement is, we will put it to a vote. If you did not come to an agreement, it's gonna come here, it's gonna go to a vote regardless, and then it's either gonna be a yes or a no.
And by the way, I don't want to be you make that and be the one making that decision, because maybe you're going to have two of the residents saying, that's great, and two of the residents saying, you didn't do enough.
Well, we'll cross
But
that
that'll
bridge
be,
when we
that'll
get
be
there.
your job. So we'll meet quickly, and we will try to be back to you on August the 30th with what we think we can do to address some of the concerns.
Okay, so just from a legal perspective, there'll be no new notification.
I believe Mr. Smith is requesting that their notices be carried so that an announcement is made this evening of the continued date of the application to August 30th, 2022 in this meeting room at 6:30 PM with no further notice.
That's correct.
Everyone in the public, you
We
heard
find
it?
that agreeable.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'm not gonna close the public portion because it was never open. Okay. Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Do I have to adjourn
I'm going to say it out loud. So, just for the record, and for clarity, application BA 5217-20, BSREP Roman numeral 3 Monroe LLC has been adjourned to August 30th, 2022 at 6:30 PM in this room. No further notice is required of the applicant.
Thank you.
Okay, board members, we still have some business here. We have to memorialize application BA-5200-20, Hikmet Siglam. Do I have a motion to memorialize? Motion. I'll second. Let me do a roll call for this.
Ms. Damiani?
I'm abstain, I was absent.
Mr. Lupo?
Yes.
Mr. Busman? Ms. Caratori?
Yes.
Mr. Tanzi?
Yes.
Mr. Jaffe?
Yes.
Chairman LaFata?
Yes. Okay, do we have any discussion items? Seeing there's none, let's move forward. We're gonna open it to the public, the general public. Anyone wishing to be heard from the general public, please come forward.
Michelle Arminio, 9 Nathaniel Street. I just want to make a quick comment about what's happening in our society and in our country. Climate, I believe in climate change. I believe in what's going on. We know we've had a heat wave. I think I would ask this board not only to consider an immediate applicant whenever they present themselves, but to understand that going forward, our community is at risk, as is the whole world, about what's happening. And
Michelle, hold on a second. Mr. Stroy,
yeah, there's still.
can we just keep it down while we can continue our meeting, please?
So I think additionally to the kinds of paperwork that you have in front of you every time an applicant comes to you, please be cognizant of what is happening to our climate, to our world, to the trees being removed in this community, to please protect us for the future. It is not just today that counts. It's going into the future of our beloved township, Monroe, and the children that we're trying to raise here. I hope that we can start really putting that into perspective at every applicant. We have a growing community. Mr. Stroy knows better than most how much water we're going to need in the future. Impervious surface is important. The proper land use. We don't have to make asphalt and concrete over every available inch of Monroe that is left. We should start really saying strictly to our ordinances. I mean, that's what they're for. I've been here, like I said, over 20 years, and I've seen all of the variances that come through. We do not have to approve variances. if in the best interest of our community, they should not be approved. I ask you all to try to do some research about our future and to really be cognizant of how you vote, and please protect all of us, our children, our seniors, and those of us in the middle, although I'm heading towards the senior part. Thank you very much for your time, and I love Monroe. Bye.
Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else in the public wishing to be heard, please come forward.
Elizabeth Fagan, 21 Woodcrest Circle. You need me to spell it? Yeah. So I'm here again. You know, I've been having a lot of problems with a lot of the developing. Now, I know that we've granted a lot of variances, and one thing I'm really got a thing about is these freaking signs. I mean, my road that we all live on, that people have lived on for, houses were built in the 70s. You cannot see them. You would not know we're there. I was looking for houses. I came to the side road, did a K-turn because there's no houses there, and left. There's a whole circle there. I didn't even know. Everyone has lived there, had neighbors, company, all from one little street sign that isn't even at the edge of our street. It's like 75 feet in. Okay, that's it. That's all we need. The venue has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 huge signs, and the 2 main signs have like 6 signs within them. I mean, you guys are killing me with these ordinances for signs. And then the one on Mount Mills, he actually had, I sent a picture. I dealt with the mayor's office. You probably weren't aware, but the one guy on Mount Mills, the Mark, I forget your last name, I'm sorry, but Resamos, but you were there at that meeting, but he had 17 signs. It was like a block. He had 17 signs.
Are these construction signs?
No,
or?
they were sale signs. They were.
Well, I think Joe may have some more input on this. Maybe I'm wrong. I think the pictures went to the zoning officer, and I think
Yeah,
the
they
zoning
took them
officer
down.
Looked into
But
it,
what I'm saying
and
is
they were
these
removed.
these gentlemen, or no, well, shouldn't say gentlemen. These people are smart, and oh well, we didn't know our guy just put up the signs by accident. It isn't an accident. They put those signs up. They had 17 signs lining the whole thing. Nobody said anything to them until some loudmouth, neighbor lady says something, and now all of a sudden they're down. And now all of a sudden they're down to 3 from 17. We are not watching these people. We're taking their word that they're doing what they say, and they're not. So when we allow them to have 2 huge signs, let me let you know, they have 10. Okay, so just take it easy. Now, and then behind Tractor Supply. Now, the road there, I took a picture of my Dodge Durango in front of the roadway, a roadway that people have to drive down to a parking lot about 30 spaces. And I took a picture of my Durango blocking the roadway. And then I came home and took a picture of my Durango blocking my driveway. My driveway is wider than that roadway. Now, granted, we don't want a lot of pavement because we want to have more space, but that doesn't mean we want to rip off our future residents, because the only one gaining is a developer, because the developer's putting down less pavement. The developers, the future resident of the venue doesn't need a sign to tell him where he lives. The only person gaining from those signs and those small roads are the developer, not the people who live there. And so when you grant these variances, or whatever they're called, you're not helping residents that are here now. You're not helping future residents. You're only helping people who are stopping by town to make a couple bucks. And I wish you would think about that more, because it's ruining town. It really is. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to be heard from the public? Seeing there's none, I'll make a motion to close the public portion.
So moved.
All in favor of closing the public portion?
Yes.
Aye.
Thank you. Do we have any new correspondences that we need to go over? No? I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion?
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
We'll see everyone August 30th. Thank you.